I'd like to welcome you all to the May 23rd meeting of the Milton School Committee. As we don't have a quorum currently, this is not an official session yet. We will enter official session as soon as one more person gets here. But we will go ahead with the non-voting items on the agenda so that people aren't sitting here all night waiting for either the air conditioner to turn on or for someone else to show up. So even though we're not in official session, I invite you, following our custom, to stand as you're able and salute the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, as I said, since we're not actually in official session, we can't approve the minutes or approve our agenda, in fact, but what I would like to do is recognize the superintendent for some of the presentations that we're going to be given this evening, and so we can honor some people for some.
Well, it's my pleasure. All the important people are here tonight. And first, I'd like to ask PS Principal James Jett to join us at the table. And we have two very, very special recognitions tonight. First, I'd like to invite Emily Posse to the table, grade 7. And Emily, would you come up with your mother? So Posse, would you join us? Why don't you begin, James? Emily, this is very, very exciting, has won 6th place in the regional spelling bee. And Mr. Jett and Emily are going to give us a little background of how Emily got to that bee, her skills, and what the experience was. Because here's a little secret, Emily. In all of the viewing public, and all of the people in this library, and the school committee, if I might speak for them, and the high school students and ourselves, we aren't to the level of speller that you are, and have that ability and that natural phonetic or memory that you have. So you have achieved quite an accomplishment here, and we want to recognize you. Mr. Jett, you want to give us some background?
Sure. Well, first of all, I just wanted to say that this didn't happen by luck or by accident.
Right.
Emily is a wonderful student, a straight A student in grade 7 in the Acadia team. So how it all came about, each year we host the spelling bee in each individual team classroom. Emily was the representative for her team back in February, and then she competed. She competed school-wide. And so she beat out other kids in grade 6, but also in grade 6, and in her grade in grade 7 and grade 8. As the overall winner, she represented Pierce in the town of Milton in the regionals right here, not right here, but next town over in Randolph. So she did a remarkable job, and as you alluded to, she came in 6th place, but to us, she was 1st place.
Always, always. Big round of applause. So do we have some questions for Emily?
We're not going to ask you to spell things.
I want to ask
What
the
was-
toughest word.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. What was the toughest
Her
word?
estimation, yeah.
Like the word I got out on.
Whatever you thought was the most difficult word.
Well, I didn't really know what the word was. I've never even heard it before, so I couldn't.
So for this scripts, I've seen the advertisements, and I've seen some of the clips. And so you went to, was it Lombardo's?
Yeah.
In Randolph, and there were hundreds of students there?
There were
It was- Yeah, there was like 20-something.
25 students from the southeast, and they were, for the most part, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And so she competed against them and made it down to the final 6. Got out on a word that I didn't even know. So
It's just like TV, they say the word, then can you ask for a definition?
Yeah, you can ask for a definition, like any related words, any like alternate pronunciations. Yeah, and then you spell it.
That is so exciting.
I'm so proud of you.
Students, do you have any questions? Well, we have this award for you, Emily. Mr. Pavlicek, Dr. Pavlicek, will you join me? So, Emily, we have this award of achievement for your sixth place from the Milton School Committee, presented to you on May 23rd. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And from Mr. Pavlicek.
Thank you.
Great, and Laura Downs wants to get a picture of Mr. Pavlicek and your family, and Mr. Jett.
Miss Gardner, you should be in there too.
No, that's okay, I'm gonna manage the
Mary
picture
sets
in
up
the
these
back.
pictures and she runs away. You notice this? Sorry.
And one quick picture, will you stay right there? Would her grandmother and I come up for one quick picture? Yes, 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 yes. Yes, with
Where do you want me to go?
Pavlicek and Mr. Jett.
This way?
Oh, go this way?
Yeah, away from the whiteboard.
One, two. Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Friends, Ms. Caputo. Congratulations. Next, we'd like to ask Principal Jett to stay with us and invite Al Lenz up. Al, and Al's mother and father and brother, would you join us at the table? So this is really a night for the Pierce School. Al is the regional finalist in the National Geography Bee. And so that was a huge accomplishment. Al went to Worcester to compete in the state competition. Mr. Jett, will you tell us a little bit about what you know about that competition?
Absolutely, very similar to the spelling bee. It's done within their rooms, and Al beat out all of the competitors in the Pierce Middle School, and he did represent, again, Pierce and Milton in the regionals, which they only selected the top 100 students in the Commonwealth to come out to that area. So Al did a great job, very much like Emily. He's an honor roll student, and he does exceptionally well. I will say this has been a big week. In addition to concerts, tonight's awards, both of them will be representing us at the Grady's Festival on Friday as well. So we're looking for more awards, hopefully platinum.
So tell us about the event, Al.
So,
Want to put the mic right down there for you?
it was it wasn't very different from what you would think. They would ask you the question, they could only repeat it once and spell the word that you asked them to. In the competition, they would have you like break up into rooms, and then you would go, and then the top 2 finalists from each room would go to compete in the top 10.
Whoa. Did they ask you rivers, continents, mountain ranges, cities?
Oh, they started with U.S. geography, and then they went to world, countries, and capitals, and then on to rivers and mountain ranges, and then to production and news.
Have you always loved geography, or does it just come naturally?
Both.
Yes, so can you tell us some of the questions that you had to answer?
I'll start with the one one of the more challenging ones I had was, I forget the name, but it was this province in Japan. Nagano. The Nagano province in Japan is known for producing lots of agricultural setting. What? Spinach. Asparagus. Well, a vegetable of some sort. It was what question was it in, and that was a really what country was it in, and that was a really
I
challenging.
wish you had asked the audience in the school community that question instead of giving the answer. Isn't that extraordinary?
Yeah.
As he's figuring it out, I'm going to the phone to Google it.
That is wonderful. Were you at Worcester State?
Yeah, we were at Worcester State University in one of their auditoriums. Yeah. Then we split off into separate rooms, and we came back to the auditorium for the final 10.
Unbelievable, and his mother and father to be congratulated.
So I would just say, Al, you are only a 6th grader, so we
Yeah.
look forward to having you come back for the next couple of years and and showing us these awards every year. So thanks for all your good work.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you,
So,
Cal.
Al, stay right there, Al. So Al, on behalf of the Milton School Committee, on today, May 23rd, we have this award for you for being the regional finalist in the National Geography Team.
Thank you.
Well, will you stand right here and get a picture with your parents? Yeah, I'll get on the outside. And Mr. Pavlicek?
Oh,
And
go on
Mr.
this side.
Chair.
Here we go. We're going to move this.
You should be.
There you go.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Those are two wonderful news stories, and they represent all of Milton's public school children. Next, I'd like to ask to join us at the table, Bill Ritchie, our Consolidated Facilities Director, and,
Before you do that, let me just, now that we have a quorum, I just want to formally call the meeting to order at this point, Maura.
thank
So
you.
we have a quorum. And
Doing that doesn't-
let me just jump back for a minute before you
Absolutely.
continue with that, and just, on our agenda, a couple of notes on the agenda that, before we approve it. Under the superintendent's report, the Bullying Prevention Advisory Committee will not be here tonight, so we'll take that off the agenda. And then, at the end, under Finance Subcommittee report, the third quarter financials, that actually doesn't require a vote, as I recall. I mean, so, it says vote there, but it's not actually required. But on our executive session, the contract negotiations does require a vote, so that should say vote. Anything else for our agenda in terms of corrections? Yes.
So I would like to move the facilities update to when Mr. Ritchie presents, because he's a part of that, so it's very brief, if that's possible.
Sure, so we could move item number 8, the facilities report, to be heard under the superintendent's
During the
report.
superintendent's report.
Anything else on the agenda? Hearing none, all those in favor? All right, we're there. So, let me move on. Is there anyone for citizen speak? I didn't see a paper, but I don't also see anyone for citizen speak. So we'll move on to our minutes. We have a couple sets of minutes that you received in the email. First is the very brief set of minutes of our April 25th reorganizational meeting.
Second.
There's not much choice here. Moved by Ms. Sheridan, seconded by Ms. Kelly. Any corrections on the agenda, the minutes of the 25th reorganizational meeting? No? All those in favor? That's unanimous. The minutes of our April 25th regular session.
I'll move them.
I'll second them.
Moved by Ms. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Sheridan. Any additions, comments, corrections to those? Seeing none, all those in favor? That's unanimous as well. Our May 2nd public hearing on school choice and regular school committee meeting, they're on one piece of paper. I think we can vote them together. I don't see a reason to hold
move
two
them.
separate votes. Ms. Kelly?
I was not present for the school choice, so can I vote? I can't vote for them.
You can vote. I mean, or you can abstain.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
All right.
You don't have to be present to vote. But if it's, I'm more than willing to second it.
So I'll move those minutes.
And I'll second it myself that way. So any comments, corrections on the minutes of May 2nd, the open public hearing on school choice and the regular meeting?
Very well done.
Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Ms. Kelly's abstaining, so it's 2-0. And finally, the minutes of the May 7th Finance Subcommittee meeting, which had a quorum, which was posted for a school committee meeting and had a quorum of members there. That's the one that was the Monday morning meeting, May 7th.
I'll move them.
I'll second them.
All right, any corrections, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor? And Ms.
I'll abstain because
So it's
I wasn't
2-0-1 with Ms. Sheridan abstaining.
present. He wasn't
So that
present.
takes care of our paperwork. And Turn
Thank
it
you.
back over to Ms. Gormley.
I'd like to invite Bill Ritchie up, our Consolidated Facilities Director, and Robert Mayhew, newly appointed Operations Manager, if you would join us at the table. In your school committee packets, and with the press, you have Mr. Mayhew's resume. We wanted Mr. Ritchie to introduce Mr. Mayhew, Bob to the public, and perhaps the school committee has some questions to connect the name to the face. On behalf of the Milton Public Schools, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Bill Ritchie, Consolidated Facilities Director. Tonight I have the privilege of bringing Bob Mayhew here. Bob was newly appointed about a month ago, started about 3 weeks ago, and the last 3 weeks he's really jumped in. Been very exciting. And Bob has about 25 years' experience in the operations and facilities. Cardinal Christian Schools, roughly 13 years, running a residential program, about 400,000 square feet space, over 180 acres. And then from there, he has worked at the Fennell Properties for a numerous amount of years, supervising and overseeing roughly 210 units. So he has a nice, extensive background and is going to be an asset to this department. So, Bob, want to say a few words?
Hi, my name is Bob Mayhew. I just wanted to take a minute to say thank you to everyone. I've been on board a few weeks now, but I'm very excited to be part of the team for Consolidated Facilities, and I look forward for the, I just want to take a minute to say thank you for the opportunity to work for a town like Milton. It's really exciting, and I look forward to many years using my skills here and being part of the team and working for you. Thank you.
With us.
Ms. Sheridan.
So for the viewing public, perhaps you can describe a little bit of what your responsibilities will be, or Bill, you can describe what they are?
Yeah, so basically, you know, the Consolidated Facilities Department is a new and up-and-running department, roughly about a year in right now. The department will oversee roughly 22 buildings, about 900,000 square feet of space, many acres, you know, police stations, fire stations, libraries, all the school buildings. Pretty much we'll just dive into everything. So obviously the schools are fairly new, but a good portion of Robert's job will be working with the school department, because we, you know, have, you know, roughly 700,000 square feet of space, where the town has roughly about 250,000. So, you know, and a good portion of the staff, there's roughly 27 staff at the at the schools versus 6 on the Consolidated Facilities. But, so he's going to be doing, you know, working with the staffing, things that I can't get to, but, you know, with vendors, contractors, cutting grass, training. You know, we started a brand-new work order system. We're doing a condition study right now of all the buildings, 22 buildings, so we'll have a nice plan for capital planning down the line. So we have a lot of great things happening right now, and we'll, you know, look forward to the brand-new department. So, you know, it's a big learning curve. It's a big learning curve for me, so it's enormous for Bob, but, you know, I think, you know, with... Yeah, he's up for the challenge, I mean, so.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry about the air conditioner, but I did get the unit going. I had to go up on the roof and kind of reprogram the system, so that's what people do in a facilities department. I mean, you never know where the emergency is going to start.
Well, I can speak for the schools that Mr. Mayhew has, from day one, integrated himself into the schools. Mr. Ritchie and Mr. Mayhew went to every building to introduce Mr. Mayhew to the administrators, to the custodians on site. He's doing the day shift, the night shifts, and we appreciate his expertise and his talent, and we welcome you.
So I asked to be able to give the facilities update while you're still here, and I'm just going to share, too, we had a facilities subcommittee meeting this week and got some pretty amazing news that I thought was worth sharing with the school committee, certainly, and the public as well. So we look on a regular basis at all of our bills. Maculus, you know, does a great job at delivering us all the information in a very concise format. And we review usage and expenditures, and we realized at this meeting that there has been a decrease in consumption, almost 10% in electric consumption this year, which is a drop-in of 1,800,000 kilowatt hours in electric consumption from 2008 to the present. And in terms of our gas consumption, we decreased somewhere between 18 to 22%. Of course, the year isn't closed out yet, but we expect that it will be an 18 to 22% decrease in consumption. And that's due in great part to many of the work that you, Bill, have been doing in the schools in conjunction with Matt. We've done an enormous amount of upgrades in the lighting around all of the various schools, and worked with the school teachers and staff to decrease consumption, shut lights off, use more efficiencies whenever possible. And so that's a huge accomplishment, and I think that we're all to be congratulated for that. So. And because of that, the Milton High School, are we going to talk about the award?
Sure.
Milton High School is receiving 2012 Energy Star rating, which is not given out very easily or to many schools in the state. And I think that it says buildings that earn EPA Energy Star use 35% less energy and generate 35% fewer greenhouse gas emissions than similar buildings across the nation. So personally and on behalf of the committee, I want to say thank you to both Matt and Bill for the great work that you've been doing to make that possible.
Welcome.
Thanks.
And I would love to share like one more piece of information that, when Matt prepares a lot of these budget sheets, and we look at it, combined over the last, since 2008 to 2013, just on the electric usage, we have saved roughly about $1,464,000, and on the gas savings, about closely almost $700,000. So that's over the last 5 years, about a $2 million savings in energy conservation measures. And that, that goes to me, it goes to Matt, our committee. We did a lot of behavioral stuff. Removing all the refrigerators in classrooms, turning off lights, saving energy. So it's really it's a combined effort of everyone. So I think that's great news for town. Hopefully we can sustain this for a few more years, but there is a period when you kind of maximize all your efficiencies. So I'm looking forward, like in my new role, we'll be working with NSTAR, looking down the line at different energy efficiencies. So when we start changing out these lights, maybe 3 years from now, to T5s or a T3, and that's when we can actually even kind of reduce the energy. So that's the thing that I get really excited about. Because I love energy conservation measures. So having someone like Bob, my right-hand man, will allow me the time to start to do all that type of research.
And all that money, all those savings,
Right.
can be put back into the schools and to teachers, and it's very important work, so thank you.
Ms. Kelly.
Thank you very much for your efforts. Definitely to be commended. And just a note on the savings, what that has allowed us to do over the past several years is rather than having dramatic cuts in our staffing, we've been able to sort of hold the line. And as we talk about every budget season, there comes a point where we're not going to be able to continue gaining those efficiencies. And we need to sort of prepare from a budgetary perspective for that day when it comes. But kudos to all the effort that's gone into, all the classrooms by Matt, et cetera, just making this a real school-wide effort. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing about that? So, Mrs. Kelly, my understanding is that, as Bill was saying, so we'll reach a ceiling, but then there'll be a few years where the technology will take off again and we'll be able to start saving again. So it's not a hard ceiling, it's a soft ceiling, and then in a few years' time,
Right.
opportunities
I guess
will-
the one note that I would make is this has been a very unusual year weather-wise, and I
Absolutely.
think that certainly contributes to some of our savings this year. So looking forward, we sort of have to factor that in terms of the way we look at our energy budget and make sure that we're still having enough dollars in there to cover what we need to. But I agree with you. Technology will continue to change. I guess the question for you will be, what's the percentage change we're talking about? If it's, a couple percentage here, it's still great, it's a great effort and worth us investing in. But in terms of the whole budget, what does that picture mean, I think is something we need to be cognizant of.
Right. Yeah, and it has been an exceptional year, for weather, but historically, when we look at it on a 6-year span, we've been saving anywhere between 5 and 8%, even without the good winter. The good winter is kind of just, icing on the cake for us. It's like, fine, we had a chance to relax. But, I'm hoping down the line that, the conservation measure will change, there'll be more grant money, and this is not even figuring the solar panels.
Right.
This energy conservation we look into tonight does not even include the solar panels. So that's another plus right there. So I think we're still doing good. We have a couple of years of lull that we can probably try to maintain, and then hopefully the technology will change, energy grant monies will come out there, and that'll be my role to try to really kind of go out there and try to find that grant.
I was going to ask that, is it too early to have an idea of what the solar panels are doing for us now that we have them on all the roofs?
Matt, you speak? Yeah.
Yeah, we have a pretty good idea. We're getting invoices since January, and you can see how much the increase is on a month-to-month basis. So, for example, on the high school here, which has about 1,300 panels, the month of April, we saved 56 or 58,000 kilowatt hours, which is basically almost enough power to run the entire Tucker School for the month. Just one perspective. The Glover School, the real advantage to that one-story building is we have 600 panels on it, and when June and July roll around, and we're at the kind of the peak amount of sun we're going to get for the year, the electricity there, that building will be 40% of its electricity will be running off of solar panels. So it's fairly substantial. Almost 25% of our electricity consumption will come from the solar panels from these projects and the 250 existing panels that are on the Cunningham Collicott, and the 10 panels that everybody sees that are kind of raised here. Those 10 panels are really enough to power a classroom, but yeah, everybody had to start somewhere, and that's where we started.
Yeah, I guess when I look at the 10 panels, I say, we've come a long way, baby. Because we have 10 panels, but up on the roofs there's 1,400 panels that people really can't see, so it's amazing what we have on our roofs. Almost 2,700 panels, I believe, combined in this whole town. That's enormous.
Yeah, that's just the schools. The town hall's got a few more, right?
Yeah.
Anything else for Mr. Ritchie?
Well, we want to welcome you, Mr. Mayhew, and thank you, Mr.
Thank
Ritchie.
you,
for
okay?
Thank you.
tonight.
I'm actually going to close that window for you. It is on the cool.
Next, we'd like to invite to the table the high school administrative team. The school committee asked for a NEASC update. We have Dr. Joe Arangio, our high school principal, Alan Cron and Yolanda Beach, our vice principals, and also joining us tonight, Dr. Martine Fisher, world language director. So welcome. The school committee asked for an update, and the high school team has been working on subcommittees and working hard. I shared with the school committee, but we waited to share with the press tonight. Could you kick off your presentation with the announcement of the letter that we received that's in the school committee packet?
We will be.
You and I have memorized.
We will be pleased to do so. Before I hit the letter, I think it might be worth a couple of minutes to turn the clock back to 2 months ago, when we came here and shared with you, discussed with you the essence of what was in what we have come to regard as the NEASC evaluation report. Just to review, it is the New England Association of Schools and Colleges that evaluates high schools, colleges and universities, independent schools throughout the New England states. And it is the NEASC that sends a visiting team in here, and they came here last November, spent this Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with us, and when they left, talked a little bit, gave us some sort of verbal feedback, but the guts of what it is that they have to share with us really came in late March, I think about a week before we came to the school committee on March, I believe it was the 24th. At that time, we gave you an overview of commendations and recommendations, talked about the standards, what they meant, try to differentiate accreditation from good schools, and separated one from the other. That necessarily, when you walk in a school, you're going to identify a good school. You don't need an evaluation report to tell you you're looking at a good school, or your kids are getting a good education. At that time, we also mentioned that we were awaiting a letter, a decision from the commission, because the report itself are the views of the team that was here. They send that report to the commission, and it's the commission that makes the accreditation decision. And at that time, we explained that the commission would be meeting about a week after we were here, and they met, and we have waited, would you believe, 2 months for that decision to come to us on paper. And last Thursday, just afternoon, I received a letter, which I then shared with the superintendent, and we finally have in our hand the accreditation letter. And just let me touch upon some pieces to it. Most importantly, in the first paragraph, the commission announces that it has voted to award Milton High School continued accreditation. And that's a decision that will last for the next decade, pending a review in about a year from now, when we have to submit a special progress report, and then perhaps 2 years later when we submit the 2-year progress report. But I would say unless we do something that would be just out of my conception in a reactive way, I am pleased to say that I think we're online, in spite of some concerns about whether certain things were up to par. We are accredited and will continue to be accredited for the next decade. The letter, as you know, if you have your copy in front of you, is a 4-page document. First 2 pages identify 26 things that the commission was either pleased or very happy to see. And again, we had 34 commendations in the report. They highlighted 26 of them. We're not going to go over them. But they basically speak to staff, they speak to support for the schools, talk about the facility. There are lots of little nuggets in there, and nice to see. You normally don't see 2 pages, 26 of these positive things identified in a report. You generally get a dozen and a half, but this is kind of special. The next 2 pages of the letter talk about a process that has to be followed, and identifies 2 things: a 2-year report, which is due in September of 2013, basically a little bit more than a year from now, and a special progress report that is due next February, about a half a year from now, in which the commission wants us to talk about action in details about 1, 2, 3, I think it's 6 recommendations. 3 of the recommendations deal with 21st century learning expectations. One of those recommendations that we must respond to next February deals with the need to provide facts about collaborative time for the faculty to work on some common planning and some issues. No real surprise. And one recommendation deals with the need and the expectation that we would have, at least at 1 grade in the high school for 1 year, we would have classes that would be unleveled. And again, not a big surprise. Interestingly, when they left, we knew that would be a recommendation, and we acted to implement that recommendation last November, December, when we wrote the new program of studies. So that one's basically done. 4 more in this little packet we need to address by next February. In the following 6, 7 months later, in September, October, we'll have to go to the 2-year report, and there are a list of these recommendations that they want to see some action and some details about. So we're essentially, we're on track. What I hope we would accomplish during the remaining portion of our time here with you is to give you an update as to what we have done with the report, which I touched upon last time. When we were here in March, I explained that we had put together a follow-up committee, which had already had one meeting. There were 22 people on the follow-up committee. We meet here early in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's that committee that plans how we attack these recommendations and make suggestions about how we will implement them. We have met regularly since that March meeting. And what I am going to turn this report over to are the other three individuals here who have chaired subcommittees or ad hoc committees that grew from the suggestions made by the follow-up committee. The follow-up committee is responsible for looking at the whole thing, parceling out the work. It is the subcommittees and ad hoc committees that turn the stuff into real action items, which they then bring back to the follow-up committee, and it's the follow-up committee which sort of massages them, tweaks them, and makes a recommendation to me as to how we will eventually implement that. So that's where we are. So with that said, let me introduce Mr. Cron, who chaired two of those subcommittees, and he will inform you what they did and basically what they accomplished.
There are so many committees. As a band director, I think of them as sections. It's the only way I can get my brain around it. But it's amazing how the process is unfolded. We received 34 commendations and 32 recommendations, and each has to be dealt with in one way or another. So the first committee was the sequencing committee, and our job was to take the 32 recommendations and organize them. So there were 6 of us that met in the morning. We met 4 times, and in those 4 meetings, we developed a do now sort of year 1 list, a 2-year list, and a 3 to 5 year list. And as you noticed, as you look at the recommendations, they group together, and sometimes things need to precede others. After receiving the most recent letter, because our work was done before this letter was received, we had estimated correctly, and all of our work in the sequencing committee was it was spot on. So we picked the right things to begin working on, and so we were very glad to see that. At the conclusion of our work in this subcommittee, we then reported to the full follow-up committee, the 22-member follow-up committee, and we made the recommendations that first we need a committee to begin looking at our 21st century learning expectations, which will then grow into our rubrics and begin to look at curriculum and all a number of other recommendations. And so we nominated Martine Fisher to chair that committee. She wasn't at that meeting. We nominated her. But we knew she would be great, and she has been. We've met 3 times, and she will report to you on the work. And I'd have to say, these 7 o'clock meetings, the people on the committee, we get up and we walk away and we say, this was really fun, because you're talking about the nuts and bolts of the school. And I run into Dr. Walsh 15 minutes after the meeting, and she says, that was really fun. So I think it's great. The other committee that was already working was the Student Advisory Committee, and that was really begun 2 years ago. But following the visit and the response from NEASC, we met 4 more times to look at the advisory program through the lens of what NEASC asked of us, which was to clarify, tighten up, refine the advisory program. The first thing we did is we contacted 23 districts in our area to find out what they're doing with advisory, how it's working, how they schedule it, the whole thing. We took that information and we looked at our own program. We looked at the questions we were asking, why we were asking them, and we found that we didn't need to spend as much time with some of the recording elements we were asking teachers to do. So we found some ways to save some time and use it a little more efficiently. We found that the advisory serving grade 9, 10, 11, and 12, we could differentiate a bit more. So for example, grade 9 in the fall, our advisors will be talking with their advisees about things like transition to the high school, whereas seniors in the fall, their advisors and advisees might be having conversations about, well, are your college recommendations? What colleges are you thinking of applying to? So we tightened up a little bit, the topics of conversation. And overall, we feel that we have a very good structure in place going forward with the advisory program.
Okay, those two reports. Martine Fisher is our World Language Chairperson, and she will talk to us about the 21st Century Learning Committee results.
Yeah. So the 7 members of the Learning Expectations Committee met 3 times, and we presented to the follow-up committee last Monday. Following the NIASC recommendations, 3 major areas have been identified as needing improvements. Number 1, our high school learning expectation need to have clearer connection with the 21st century skills in order to promote, and I'm giving a reduced list, but such things as application of learning to authentic tasks, development of problem solving, and development of critical thinking. Number 2, our learning expectation need to be more closely connected and embedded in the curriculum, daily instruction, and assessment. And finally, very important, they need to be readily measurable. So a question that we regularly ask ourselves at 7 in the morning is, how are we going to measure those? How are we going to assess that it's actually happening? So we still have work to do, but I would like to give you 2 examples of to illustrate what we are trying to do. So if I take our current 3rd academic expectation, which reads, all Milton High School graduates will use problem-solving skills to reason effectively. We now have all Milton graduates will effectively apply critical skills to problem solve. So as you can see, a focus on application of learning. You don't learn to learn, you learn to do something with it. Another example with the 4th academic expectation, which reads, all Milton graduates will utilize appropriate resources and technology. Our new phrasing goes, all Milton graduates will apply tools and technology to a variety of authentic tasks. Once again, you don't use a computer to use a computer. I think you understand the picture. So the last thing I would like to say that learning expectations are really interconnected, as I am sure you understand, and function as a whole. So changing the phrasing of one will obviously affect the others. So to this point, we have consolidated the expectation from 7 to 5, but this is not a final decision. We are still in the process of working, and there is work to be done. So we are going to meet again to get to a final product. Thank you. Next.
Okay. And now Ms. Beach will talk about the collaborative time recommendation, which I'm sure will become a big issue.
Okay. So with the time subcommittee, there are 12 of us on the time subcommittee. And we met at 7 in the morning, just as all the other committees met, and definitely our teachers are to be commended because they're volunteering their time to come in. And as Mr. Cron suggested, they're also saying we're enjoying the work. With the time subcommittee, what drives us is what was stated in the letter that we received from NIASC. And I just want to read verbatim regarding the special progress report, because this special progress report requires responding and taking action by February. And so the key point that relates to our subcommittee is this time piece. And so the special progress report that's due February 1st says that we need to provide detailed information on action taken to address the following. And one of those points is to provide teachers with increased formal, structured time for them to collaborate within content areas and across content areas for the purpose of improving teaching and learning. And so that's what drives us. When we meet, we review our goal, and in doing this, the goal is to come up with a proposal or proposals that we can share. We're also keeping in mind that what we're coming up with, we're doing some research so that we can make, some informed suggestions. And so what we've done is we've contacted 22 other districts to find out what are they doing, how are they providing collaborative time for their teachers. And in the research, what we've come up with is that they're doing a variety of things that's a combination of professional development days as well as either late starts or early release days, the vast majority having the early release days. And it's ranging in terms of the PD days, professional development days, it ranges from 3 to 5 days per year. And in terms of the total number of hours, in addition to the PD days, the total number of hours of meeting time throughout the year ranges from 15 to 25 hours per year, and that's just an average. So there are definitely schools that are meeting even more than that. We also, as a committee, took a look at the 32 recommendations from NEASC, and we identified the ones that are time-specific, where we need time to do those things, and there are 7 of them. And so we understand that with the proposal or proposals that we come up with, those are the issues that need to be addressed in terms of teachers having time to address those issues. We're definitely in the developmental stage of this, and with the proposals that we're coming up with, what we've done is we've met as a committee 4 times, and we've also presented to the follow-up committee twice, and we will meet with them a 3rd time this coming Friday. And so we're having discussions, and in coming up with, possible proposals, we're also looking at the pros and the cons, because we understand that with every decision there's an impact, there are implications. And one of the things that I want to stress that we're keeping in mind is that we're trying to come up with proposals or suggestions for how to create the time that are either no dollar cost or minimal dollar cost, because we understand that that's a concern. We know that, our town has certain constraints and has, been wrestling with these fiscal issues. And so we're definitely sensitive to that in what we are proposing. There's a lot of work to do for sure, and we have definitely been doing a lot of work and enjoying the work as well. And so again, we're going to meet with the follow-up committee again this Friday, because we need that time to discuss so that we can come up with proposals that we'd like to share.
Questions?
Questions from the committee? Mr. Walker?
Did you have one?
I will, but I'll defer.
Okay, I've got a few. And thanks for that presentation. And congratulations on the accreditation, although I have to say, with all of the good things that are going on and the work the leadership team did in preparation, I had very little doubt, if any, that we would get the accreditation, but congratulations to all of us. I took some time to look over the what I would call the executive summary, and I have a few questions about some of the findings and recommendations. And the way I'd like you to frame the answer is this something that we agree with? If we do, over what period of time do we think we can address it? Do we have in-house expertise, or will we need external expertise? And as Ms. Beach alluded to, are there significant cost implications and significant collective bargaining implications? So the first one was that one of the findings was that differentiated, personalized, and student-centered instruction is limited. Do we agree with that? And if so, how do we start to approach solving that?
If your other questions are like this one, we're going to be responding to questions of degree. As I tried to explain last time, when the recommendation was, when a judgment was made to the school about the lack of something or the presence of something, the $64 question was to what degree. You rarely get they're not doing it, or that they are doing it 100% of the time. General questions about whether it is done most often, is it done frequently, is it done usually, or less than that. I would not want to get into a question of whether we would agree with every single one of their recommendations. I think they touched upon something that they identified that we needed to implement. We are going to do our darndest to to implement those recommendations in the most, Ms. Beach mentioned, the most cost-effective way possible. We're trying to do them in a way that addresses what we think was their intention. And when you talk about the first one, which I will call differentiated instruction, I think every school in America is striving and working to differentiate instruction for students in the school. We have this, the Milton Public Schools has invested time in professional development for administrators on this very topic, and we meet on a monthly basis in the school library here, talking about what differentiated instruction means. It is a very complicated, intertwined issue. We, as the superintendent might explain, it has taken us a year to try to get every administrator on board as to what it is. We take this complicated thing, and we have worked at the high school to try to provide a working definition for it, something that we could use in the school, administrators and teachers. We're at that point, along with some other definitions for some of the best practices that have been included in the evaluation report. So we have something on paper. We are working to get it into our faculty handbook. It will be a springboard for faculty discussions for the next year. So the question is, to what degree was it in here? What was it that those folks saw or didn't see about differentiated instruction? I'm not sure if I want to get into a discussion whether I agree with it or not. Is it a good practice? If that's the bottom line question, yes, it's good practice.
Well, I'm assuming that if they listed it as one of the 4 key deficiencies, there were only 4, and they listed that as one, that they saw, I would say, a significant opportunity for improvement. Is that an incorrect assumption?
Yes, you might say that. You might say that.
Yes, it's an incorrect assumption.
No, I would say it is in their decision. I prefer not to get into a discussion as to how those items ended up in a report, but I will tell you from my previous experience, the chairperson at the last day asked the visiting team to submit to him a single recommendation in each of the standards that he thought would be important for the school to follow through on. He took those and he identified 3 or 4 of them to include in the report. His decision that these would be 4. Did they represent the consensus of the entire committee? No. It's his call as to what to put in there. If that's the piece that you're talking about that was in the executive summary, that's his call to include them, and they are important enough, and we'll address them that way.
Okay. The second was the school does not have an organized approach to use teacher and classroom assessment results to improve instruction.
I will tell you from my own professional judgment, working at Milton High School this year, I would disagree with that. My own personal professional judgment. I think when teachers, we already have a process in place at the end of the first semester, first half year. Teachers took the results of midterm exams. They had meetings and discussed the results of what those exams suggested with their department at meetings in February and March. So that information was plowed back into the program. I think our average teacher, when they look at the results of classroom testing, takes that information and realters, reformats, restructures the teaching that goes on subsequent to that. So I think that goes on in the room. There may be pieces of it that the visiting team didn't see, but we will make an effort to make that clearer and to ensure that to what degree they saw it, they would see more of it if they came back in here again.
Okay. Develop and implement a school-wide format for a curriculum that includes units of study with essential questions, concepts, content, and skills, and so on.
Would you be good enough to repeat that again, please?
Develop and implement a school-wide format for a curriculum that includes units of study with essential questions, concepts, content, and skills?
When the school began the self-study before I came here, it had guidelines for developing a curriculum that had been established 2 years prior to these new indicators, these new standards. They rewrote the curriculum to meet at what was at that time, I think there were 6 criteria for each curriculum guide. They did that in a fair way. When the committee came in, they added some pieces to it that were not in the first part because they thought adding these pieces would improve what we already have. When the 21st century learning expectations are clarified, when the committee makes its report, we approve them in the follow-up committee. They will then become the basis for doing lots of work. One of them is to revise the curriculum, and when we get around to rewriting the curriculum based on what they submit to us, we will include some pieces of it that were not in the original ones, which were, I think there were some pieces in there which talks about learning activities, which were not in the first go-round in guidelines. I think there were assessment pieces that are in there now that were not in the first go-round in guidelines.
And when would you expect that process would be completed?
It would be up to the follow-up committee and Mr. Jett, who would succeed me, as to whether that will be done a year from now, or 2 years from now, or 3 years. We have 4 more years to implement this. This is probably going to be somewhere in the middle of the pack. I don't have the list of what the sequencing committee, how they place these in order, but I would suggest it's probably somewhere in the middle of the pack.
May I speak to that one? My work when we got this letter was to look what rose to the actual letter. And I would bring your attention to, in the letter, one of the commendations, the assessment and revision of the curriculum has already begun in English, math, and social studies content. To your comment, the development of driving essential questions included in the social studies curriculum. So those were identified as commendations. And when you put the question to Dr. Arangio, my analogy to parents is often, how well can you be? How healthy can you be? And so our health is our curriculum and our instructional techniques. And so I would never expect anyone to say that curriculum will be written and that will be finished on this day. There's curriculum in every discipline in the Milton Public Schools. Then the bar is set by NEASC that they want to see. When they first put the outline out, they didn't want driving questions. And then they set a new expectation for driving questions. So again, in my estimation, I wouldn't say to you, well, 3 years from now, this will be complete, because this is always a work in action. And so we have to prioritize. You can see that they identified English, math, and social studies. So all of the disciplines have to be to the level that they've recognized, and that's ours to come up with the short and long-term plan and the timeline for those to be achieved. But it's interesting that if you read from their report to Dr. Arangio's response, everything that the visiting team had, what rose to the occasion of the letter?
I appreciate that. I think, though, here's where I'm going. It seems to me that things like differentiated instruction, more differentiated instruction, a school-wide curriculum that is consistent across the disciplines are things that will ultimately improve student performance. So I think we have to be able to talk, at least in general terms, about when can we get this done. I mean, we can't say, we need to be able to say when we can get it done.
Well, right now, there's curriculum in every single area. They set new standards that they want, again, the driving questions part of the curriculum. So every single curriculum has to be revisited for those driving questions. Again, there's differentiated instruction to different levels and different teachers' professional development. Now, this last year, led by Assistant Superintendent Phelan and all the administrators, coming up with a common language so that to the World Language Director, differentiated instruction, when Alan Cron and Yolanda Beach go into a world language classroom, the teacher's getting the same message as the principal and the world language director wants them to understand about what is differentiated instruction. So that is a huge initiative within the system, K through 12, so that we're all speaking the same language and the teachers understand that language. And when you go in to observe, you're seeing, and the teacher understands what you're looking for. So those are huge. Again, when one topic takes over the administrative leadership for the whole year, it is a priority for the district. Differentiated instruction.
One more question.
Go right ahead.
In the recommendations, provide professional development on the use of data to maximize the effectiveness of instructional decisions and practices.
That would probably have to be done by an outside consultant. That is the one thing that we do not have the skills within the Milton Public Schools, to my knowledge, to address. So that will be a dollar cost item. That would be when in fact the follow-up committee identifies that the time is right to implement that, we will approach the superintendent's office with a request that we need help, professional development time for that. That's one of the few things that we can't handle in-house.
And I would say that's something that we've heard about from our elementary schools, from the Pierce Middle School, that some of that activity is going on. So certainly the follow-up committee should look at it, but I think that's something we can all agree, again, that using data to drive how you change and change instruction and differentiate instruction is a good thing. So I don't think that requires a lot of study, so hopefully they'll be back to us, you, with a recommendation pretty quickly. If we need outside expertise, let's go get it.
And to your point, Mr. Walker, the school committee was very clear in, one, their budget, come up with an achievement advancement budget, but the school committee was also very clear, and I gave the direction to Dr. Aranjo to think outside the box. And so if you're going to move the system ahead, Ms. Beach was conservative, but I said to Dr. Aranjo, have the groups come ahead with recommendations, and you have to brainstorm. And so I said, if you can come up with a range of ideas, some at no cost and some that are going to be cost, I want you to present to the leadership team the entire spectrum, think outside the box. They are thinking outside the box when they're calling other districts who 1 or 2 days a week, high school, we'll get a survey from the 2 high school students, come later to school. And teachers use that time for this kind of work before school. So to Ms. Beach's presentation, they're looking at all the different models, and I said to them, leave cost is only one of the criteria. How easy are they to implement? How fast can they implement them? How many teachers can be impacted? What's the impact on students? And cost is another one of the criteria that will evaluate the options that they come forward with. So the charge was from the school committee to think outside the box to achieve these, again, recommendations.
Sure.
I would just like to follow up with that by saying I don't think that we should leave in the minds of anyone here that formative and summative assessment data isn't being used to drive instruction. I'm sure that that's happening.
Yes, it is.
On many different levels. So I think that there are needs in that area for sure, but I just didn't want to leave it that it wasn't happening, so.
No, it's a question of degree, and remember, the yardstick is that they want formal. That word formal keeps coming up,
Right.
Structured keeps coming up, organized, and frankly, the key word, all teachers.
Right.
When you have 120, employees in the school, and you have 100 of them, pretty close, 90 some odd who are teachers, if you have 1 or 2 or 3 who are not with it yet, we're not all doing it, and it's the question of degree. Point I probably clumsily try to make a little bit earlier. We're doing all of this. AP results, SAT results, MCAS results, other results, certainly a consequence of looking at what kids have done in the past, how that has improved. school-wide scores or not, what areas of deficiencies. And that's from the standardized high-stakes test. The piece that NEASC is pushing us to is more putting even a greater focus than we might typically expect on the results of teacher assessments. Say, don't forget that part, use that part. Spend a lot of time on that part, but not only just on one teacher, but get all the teachers at this grade level who are teaching all the same subject to do this kind of testing, to get that information back and plow it in. So it isn't just to address the stuff that becomes, key to newspapers. It is doing the stuff that goes on every single day in class. So you get balancing both, which is a huge struggle and requires an awful lot of time. This collaborative time is the key. There are two ways to change learning. I mean, you provide better quality instruction and you provide more time to do it. And both of those pieces are dependent on getting the faculty to collaborate on units, on model lessons, on assessments, on looking at student work, and being consistent across the board what it is. 20 years ago, people taught in a classroom, closed the door, and did their own thing. Those days are gone. They're gone. It was easy to do. You were the king of your classroom, and there were few questions about what you did. The only difficulty is when kids went from this room to this room, or from that floor to this floor, in the same subject, you would think that you were in a different country. That ended. And this collaboration piece, we all mandated it. The state mandated it. The federal government wanted to see more consistency in it. But lo and behold, we wanted all these things. Well, when is this going to be done? During lunch? Not going to happen. That's the time piece, the collaborative time. It is key. It is key. This report can serve as a stimulus or as a framework for school improvement. You need not to leave that alone. Let it go that way. There'll be other competing agendas coming in the next few years. People will want to do this and do that, well-meaning and well-intentioned. There's plenty on the table for this school to deal with, and they can do it in a systematic, organized, and committed way if you allow them to do it. There's an organization in place to do it. Let it run. Please let it run.
One of the issues, you touched on this with NEASC, is since they only visit decennially, the world changes in 10 years. And the one thing you can absolutely count on is that when NEASC comes again in 10 years, what they'll be looking for will be nothing like what's on the paper here. 10 years ago, this notion of assessment just wasn't there. I mean, they were just getting into standards. They were just talking about standardized curriculums, but, in those days, assessment was the final exam or a midterm exam. And and to most people listening who talk about assessment, say, well, you give tests. Well, that's not what they're talking about when they're talking about assessments. They're talking about ongoing, daily, weekly, unitly measures of what students are learning. And just, 2 tests a year or 4 tests a year or whatever, to their mind doesn't even count. So it's hard for a lot of people to get their head around what NEASC is talking about, because the language that they're talking isn't necessarily the language that most of us, who aren't in the classroom this year, are listening and hearing. I mean, when we hear assessments, we think tests. Tests. What else would an assessment be? But, it isn't what it is anymore. And so the one thing you can count on with NEASC and with any of the ASCs, the 7 of them regionally across the country, is that, what's important now is going to look very different in 10 years. So you can say, people often say, well, you got a report 10 years ago, how come you're not on target? Well, we were on that target, but this is a new target. And there's nothing wrong with that. Pedagogies change and thoughts on the best way to operate change, but it is hard to keep up with it. I mean, there's no question about it. Not that anything, I'm not going to say anything they're saying is a bad idea. It's just hard to keep up with all the different things that are going on in terms of the pedagogy of how this works. Ms. Kelly.
First of all, thank you very much for all the work that's going into this. Obviously, there's a whole bunch of passion behind this, and everyone's doing this to improve education at the Milton High School, and probably it will trickle down all the way through the school system. So a couple things. The first is in much of the documentation from NEASC, it mentions the 21st learning expectations. which I think in the previous discussion, I don't know whether that's aligned with Common Core or whether it's a totally different thing. And I guess I would present to you that the Milton School Committee is the policy committee of the school system, and understanding what our targets are and whether we agree with all of the 21st century expectations or all of the Common Core, or whether we want to add some additional expectations for Milton Public School kids, is something that needs to be put on the table and discussed, especially before we all start going down our different improvement positions. The other thing I would say is on academic expectations of the Milton High School, that again is a policy. And I think we would probably defer to whatever your recommendations are, but that is a process that needs, I think, to come to this table and say, for the Milton High School going forward, and it will be in our handbook, et cetera, these are now our expectations. So in terms of timelines, I think we need to somehow fit the Milton School Committee in some of these decisions. Not that we're going to tell you how to do things, but that certainly the overarching policy around our direction needs to be brought here. And so I guess I'm feeling a little bit uncertain as to what we're working against, what's the goals that we're setting for ourselves. I think they're probably all laudable, but sort of having a comprehensive view at this point, I'm feeling a little bit dumbfounded. And maybe that's just not because I'm not an educator and I'm not, I can't give you what the 21st century learning expectations is. But I think it's a worthy discussion to have in public. And again, I'm not sure how broad we're talking in terms of what that discussion would be, but I think it would benefit the entire community to understand sort of how the process for setting what our goals and objectives are via policy are for moving our system forward. So I guess I would defer to the administration and hope that we can work on some sort of schedule where we can start talking about that and make sure that the things that we're moving forward on, everyone's in agreement with, and that it's the right direction, and that it's including all the things that we think are important.
Mr. Walker?
I would agree wholeheartedly, and I would add that we've talked about a schedule for doing an assessment of this year's performance around now, using that information to think about what the goals should be for the superintendent and the system, and to have that process completed no later than, I think we voted September, end of September. So I very much agree that if we're going to be talking about this year's performance, about goals for the superintendent, about 21st century learning expectations, that now is about the time we should be doing it if we're going to complete that schedule on time. And I think it's critically important and only fair to Mary, the superintendent, that we let her and her leadership team know early enough in the school year what the goals are for that year. So I think we're talking about a schedule that goes from now until the end of September and has to be completed by then.
Ms. Kelly?
Just one follow-up. You had mentioned that we've decided on one unleveled course.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what that is? Because I don't know.
Yes, it was in the one unleveled course is the course in social studies at the freshman level. The option we had to identify it in English, math, science, social studies, or world language. There were valid reasons why we did not choose world language, math, English, and science. We decided that the one course which was really at the 9th grade level, which would benefit from having a variety of kids at different levels of ability, interest, whatever, a discussion kind of a thing, get them into the high school, that was the one that probably would pay the greatest dividends.
Ms. Kelly?
And if I could just follow up on that. So social studies at the middle school is not leveled, is that correct? So that makes sense. But I guess my question would be, going forward to 10, 11, 12, is the expectation it would remain unleveled throughout, or
No.
that it's only that first?
The requirement is that one course at one grade level, we thought one time.
And I guess I question that. So if, again, these are the peers that come in and say, we want to see this, and they said we want to see at least one, I would presume, right? Not just one. Why would we not consider having it unleveled throughout? And this gets to differentiated instruction and all those kinds of things. And granted, I'm not going to tell you how to do things. I'm just questioning why we would just do that one initial one as opposed to keeping it throughout.
I think the commission, this goes back at least a decade, maybe a decade and a half, when it was about 15 years ago. I think they recognized that with the pressure in school to really push towards high achievement for all students, there were arguments why kids began to separate themselves at the high school. And believed that although there was this pressure and this emphasis on going as far as you can, as quickly as you can, and reaching with kids that had developing interests and skills and whatever, you'd get this branching out of interest and specialties and whatever. And how do you allow that to happen and still provide this commitment to homogeneous groupings, at least at one time? So that was the whole issue. I think they realized that if you did this, that if you brought a freshman class into a school and all they were from the get-go, from the first day they came in, separated into these levels and tiers that were moving in these different directions, there needs to be some place where you mixed them up and they all got together at least one time. And that was the commitment to, so it's the question about homogeneous and heterogeneous groupings and what that means. The emphasis was the national and statewide attention to going as far as you can, as quickly as you can, and that brings with it some cost, and it is the separation of kids throughout the entire program all the time.
Thank you.
Anything else? Ms. Gormley?
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity. First, I want to, on behalf of the Milton Public Schools, congratulate Alan Cron on the principalship of Rockland High School. Alan. I want to publicly congratulate Alan. I want to publicly thank Dr. Arangio for an extraordinary year, as no one referred to Dr. Arangio as an interim principal of Milton High School. Your leadership has been extraordinary. On behalf of the Milton Public Schools and the town, I want to thank you. We want to congratulate, as long as the high school team is here, Stephen Pierre, our school committee rep, who's going off to university. You're going off to? Congratulations. You've been an outstanding representative of the student body. And again, we value NEASC. And as Dr. Arangio alluded to, there are state and federal tests. And NEASC, the director said, consider this 1,000 hours of free consultation. And so in the commendations, we certainly look at the recommendations to Alan Cron and Joe Arangio and Yolanda and Martine. They gave commendations to the leadership roles of building administrators and teachers. The degree to which teachers, students, and parents are involved in meaningful and defined roles in decision-making. The visibility of the principal throughout the school day. And I think that just speaks to the underlying theme in all of these, the collaboration, the leadership that you've brought to Milton High School. So to each of you, I want to thank you. Milton's high school students, and for the town of Milton, couldn't be in more capable hands and talented hands. Thank you. Thank you all. Next, in happenings, I have a presentation to present to the school committee and to the public. Mr. Gillis, would you distribute these to the audience? We have a presentation tonight on our elementary programs. Wait till everyone gets settled. I don't know whether they have to turn the lights out too. Mr. Lynch, do they have to turn the lights out?
Mr. Lynch isn't here anymore.
Great, thank you, Mr. Phelan. We have a presentation tonight, and on our elementary programs, our current elementary assignment process, our world language, the work of our world language committee, that the school committee was represented by Kristen Bagley-Jones, our enrollment history and trends in our English and French immersion program, the impact of these enrollment trends, and I have a recommendation for you tonight. So that's the overview of the presentation. I'm going to bring you back to the work of the World Language Committee, a group of parents, teachers, administrators, chaired by Mr. Phelan. Did you have a co-chair?
Gracie Burke.
Gracie Burke, our World Language Director, and again, you were well represented by Kristen Bagley-Jones. That group was collaborated as a group of administrators, teachers, and parents. They put a tremendous amount of work into their report. They solicited input from teachers and parents and guardians through online surveys. They analyzed our elementary programs. They developed 4 possible assignment plans. They identified the weaknesses and strengths of each of the assignment plans, and they came forward with the alternative assignment plan. And that's how we've been assigning our students coming out of kindergarten and first grade to our English and French immersion program. So the alternative assignment program, again, this committee met 2 years ago. A parent or guardian selects a program for grade 1, English or French immersion. There are a fixed number of classes per school for English and French. Our schools were constructed, and we have a certain number of classrooms in each school, and we established that at the Tucker and the Cunningham School, we would have 2 French immersion first grades, 2 English first grades, 1 French immersion first grade, and at the Glover and Tucker, the Glover and Collycott, our bigger schools, we would have 2 English and 2 French immersion first grades. A lottery would be held by school to fill those classes, and if there was an oversubscription, the World Language Committee in this alternative assignment plan said that we would create an auxiliary class or classes to accommodate the choices of the parents for the students. And that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years. I prepared for you historic enrollment so that we'll bring you to the red line. The World Language Committee made the recommendations 2010, 2011 school year. I want to bring your attention to that year. Mr. Phelan's indicating in red how the Cunningham was going to have 2 English and 1 French immersion, 2 being the English class, 2 French immersion classes, and there was an auxiliary class added at the Cunningham. In that same year, there was a auxiliary class added at the Tucker School. Those numbers would have been 2 English and 1 French, but the 2 auxiliary classes in that year, lotteries were held. We then went to the next school year, 2011-12, that we're in now, and we have 1 auxiliary class, and that auxiliary class is at the Cunningham School. So again, the basis of the schools, 2 English, the first number, 1 French at the Cunningham. The auxiliary class for the district this year is at the Cunningham School. And then we're now looking at the enrollment for next year. And we've got the returns from the parents and guardians, and driving the decision to look at this year is that at the we have the 2 English, 2 French at the Collycott. At the Cunningham, 1 English, 2 French classes. And again, I want to bring your eye to, our goal is to have 2 English classes and 1 French. The enrollment drove 1 English class and 2 French classes. At the Glover, 2 English, 2 French, a second auxiliary at the Glover, so that turned into 3 French classes. And at the Tucker, 2 English classes, 1 French class. And I've totaled for you, so that you have this to look at, the number of English and French historically leading up to this year. You can see in 2010, 2011, 8 English classes, 8 French classes. 2011, 12, 9 French classes, 9 English classes, 7 French classes. And this year, 7 English classes and 8 French classes. I've given you the enrollment, the average class size since 2007-8 in the English program and in the French program. That's just for you to have historical data. These are the kinds of questions that individuals ask when we're looking at the 2 programs. Now we come to the historic enrollment, English and French by percentage. And what we've done in this chart, you know from our discussions that at the Collicott and Cunningham, we have 2 substantially separate classes, our STEP and our LEAP program. Our STEP program, children who have emotional issues, and our LEAP program, children who are developmentally delayed. They are not in these numbers. We've also taken out the special education children who are at the Tucker and the Glover, who are who have the IEPs in the COTOT programs. So this is all of the children, and we're giving you the historical data that brought us to this presentation tonight. And so what this enrollment, we had data that we have the numbers of children with special ed IEPs, but if you take all of that data and you analyze it and you assess it, the impact of that data is that the limited enrollment in the English program creates a higher ratio of students in special education in the English program. And the decreased enrollment in the Glover and Tucker English programs results in limited number of role model students for co-taught programs. So when we have less children in the English program, at the Tucker and the Glover School, we are committed to these co-taught programs. I want to bring you back, you understand as well as I do, but for the viewing public, we created these co-taught classrooms under the prior superintendent. The co-taught program was going to go from kindergarten to grade 3, and we were going to have 1 strand. The program is so successful that the co-taught program runs kindergarten through grade 5 at the Tucker and the Glover schools. And the philosophy was that children in regular ed would rotate in and out as role models. When you have a small enrollment, the role models perhaps might have to serve 3 or 4 years if you don't have a large enough population in your English program so that the children can rotate in and out as role models. And the other factor on this enrollment chart should be that at the Cunningham, one of the driving forces when the percentage gets this high in the French immersion is that there weren't enough children to create 2 English first grades. And over the years, when French immersion began, and there was a single strand of French, that was one of the issues if you chose the French immersion program. If you chose the French immersion program, you might well be in 1 strand. But we're an English district, and in the English program, you want to have 2 strands of English. You want to have 2 classes. You want to have 2 classes so that the children aren't a single group for 5 years. You want to be able to integrate those children back and forth. I didn't really get to this one yet. You want to have, as I said, at the Tucker and the Glover, a number that you can rotate in, the role models. So that too becomes an issue when the percentages, what the percentage got to this year with 66% in the French, we don't have a number large enough in the Cunningham first grade to have 2 classes. My proposal is to have, at the Collycock Cunningham, the children integrated into 3 classes. I'll call your attention to, I forwarded you a letter that I sent to all of the current kindergarten parents, asking them to examine their choice for English or French. The principals worked with me, and we wanted to just clarify all of the issues for parents, understand how their decisions are really driving these classroom assignments district-wide, and if they were going to re-examine their decisions, to do it now, to talk to staff and principal or myself. And we had 6 individuals who did transfer from the French to the English program. We had one as recently as this week. Would you turn to the next chart? So the impact of these enrollment trends. Someone could say that number in French immersion, that percentage in English, what is the impact on the district? The decreased enrollment in English creates single strands in the English program. We live in America, we live in an English district, and we all speak English, and single strands in English are not our goal in setting up our schools, in assigning our children. Again, to have one class have to move through or again, for the not optimum for the Cunningham students, the integration with the Collycock. We've done it before and it worked, but again, we have 2 independent schools. We'd like to be able to have 2 English strands so that the children can be assigned and divided between the 2 classes each year. We have new families moving into the district for 5 years, and those families move into the English program. They don't move into the French immersion program after the first grade unless they come from French-speaking countries. The decreased enrollment in the English limits the flexibility in classroom assignment. To my point, if you only have 1 class, there can be no matching with gender, with needs. Again, you all understand the elementary classroom where you're together all day in a classroom. Often you have teachers making recommendations next year about putting certain children together or separating certain children. Again, that flexibility is eliminated when you don't have 2 classes. Restriction on inclusionary programs. At the Cunningham, where the LEAP and the STEP program exist, those students are integrated into the English classrooms in 1st and 2nd grade. Because in the French immersion classrooms, the children speak French, and the children in these 2 programs don't speak French. And so if you only have 1 strand, then the children from those 2 substantially separate classes have to be integrated into the same classroom. It's optimum to have 2 different classrooms to integrate those children into. That's one example of when you only have 1 classroom or the numbers are so low that those put restrictions. The next is the limited pool of role model students for co-taught programs. I alluded to this before. At the Tucker and the Glover, where the co-taught programs exist, you want the children in the regular ed program. Again, the program is highly successful. I'll bring you back to this committee when parents and guardians were here. We had lots of discussion about the co-taught program, and people now request that their children be in the co-taught program. But the model provides that you're able to rotate role models in and out of the program, and if your enrollment is low in the English program, you're not going to have the number of students to rotate in during those 5 years. And the decreased enrollment in English has driven French immersion classroom size, obviously, to be large. On the administrative side of this issue, limited pool of qualified French-speaking elementary certified teachers. Again, we've worked hard. There's always a question in the public. French immersion teachers have to be elementary certified. Every teacher that's hired has to sit down and have an interview with our world language director. Mr. Phelan and I and our principals don't speak French. I've often found a candidate who said they speak French, and I would hire the candidate. They were a phenomenal teacher. But then when they had the interview in French, their French wasn't to the level of having to speak French all day. And so over the years, in some substitute situations, again, we've been able to staff with certified teachers that met these qualifications, but when it gets into substitutes, sometimes there's been issues it's been difficult to fully staff the substitute situation. Budget implications, staffing classes with low class size. When at the Cunningham, when we're have a low class size for next year, and we're looking to integrate that one class with the 2 Collycott classes, parents have approached me, would we create, and Mr. Walker, I said, actually asked the same question, what would be the breaking number that we would create 2 first grades? And my goal is, through the letter sent out to all the parents, through this presentation, and again, our teachers and our principals working with our families, that if changes are to be made, if individuals are going to choose the English program, they do that so that we're able to look district-wide and determine if we have the number of children to create. Again, our goal, I've said to parents and to the school committee in other districts, an optimum experience for a child's career is to be in a first grade of 18 children. And that happens in other communities. So 16 to 18 children is an optimum first grade experience, and it also provides us for room when children move in to the Milton Public Schools. You live in a district where children move into this district all through their school career. And then organizational consistency from year to year. Again, I'm with superintendents. They talk about movement of teachers. You've heard about looping, where a teacher will be with a group of children and then move to the second grade experience, and then the third year move back to the first grade. And it speaks to teachers being able to be at grade levels, develop their expertise at that grade level, and not have to move. Our teachers have been flexible. Our teachers, again, have developed the expertise at the different grade levels, but again, looking towards organizational consistency from year to year, and going back to the way that we've created our schools at the Glover and the Tucker to really provide for the 5-year experience that we have, the classrooms to house all of our students. The World Language Committee, their recommendation for lottery capping of French immersion was one of the 2 viable options proposed by this group of parents and administrators and teachers who looked at every aspect of the Milton Public School elementary program. The committee concluded that capping the program would be necessary if enrollment trends continued. If you go back, and we'll give you a reference to how to check that World Language Committee presentation. So we've actually copied from the World Language Report. I don't want to read to you, but in this option, the superintendent would fix the number of classes of French immersion per school and the number of seats per class. Families would select to enter the French immersion lottery. If more students select French than seats available, a lottery would be held to determine who was enrolled in French immersion. Students not selected would remain in their home school for English. Mr. Phelan? So again, recapping, creating a lottery and capping the French immersion program. The results of capping. Enrollment in the English program would increase. Single strands in the English program would be eliminated. Increased number of English classrooms optimizes the school's ability to heterogeneously assigned students. You all understand that. If you have 2 English classrooms, you're better able to mix the children every year. Our experience is, unless you went to some place that had a single strand, is that every year you had a different group of children in your first, second, third, fourth, and fifth grade experience. And again, those assignments are not done randomly. Those assignments are done by teachers looking at achievement, looking at gender, looking at IEPs, looking at often family requests of students, families, older children who have had a teacher. There is a number of factors that go into those assignments. Increased number of English classrooms would provide more options for inclusion. This, where I alluded to at the Cunningham, the LEAP and the STEP program, if, again, our goal is to have 2 English classrooms at the Cunningham Collycott, because the goal of the program, those substantially separate classrooms, those children begin minimally to be integrated for art, music, library, and physical education. And upon the success of their program, they move into math and language arts integration. There are children at the 4th and 5th grade who will go for a good part of the day. And our goal is to have those children totally integrated and in the mainstream. And the pool of role model students would increase, allowing for more flexibility in assigning students in co-taught classrooms. And for the public to keep in mind, 2 of our schools have full-running co-taught programs that are highly successful. And I told a group of parents the other day, I want to bring you back to a few short years ago, we had over 90 children in out-of-district placements in the Milton Public Schools. Those placements are costly, but more importantly, those placements are not where the first choice of parents, if in fact we can create programs in our schools. Parents and guardians want their children in the Milton Public Schools, in their neighborhood schools. And again, when you have a program at the Cunningham, those children are coming from the whole district. But I've said to groups, we went from 90 to 98 children in out-of-district placements, down to Mr. Phelan, Mr. Gillis, 45, 49 children. Those children are in our schools. They didn't move to other communities. You have, in this community, has stepped up and created and done the right thing and created these special ed programs, and they enhance our school district. They are one of the assets of the Milton Public Schools. And so we're committed to these programs in these 2 schools. And again, we need every aspect of the program to thrive. We need to be able to provide those role models. Organizational stability and predictability would be realized for both programs. Again, the recruitment, hiring, and retention of certified teachers will remain consistent due to fixed teacher assignments and openings from year to year. All sections of grade 1 will have an appropriate class size to allow for sufficient budgeting for staff, and the consistency in staffing, curriculum, and school climate. Again, we met with our leadership team. We discussed this option to recommend for, again, the next page, Mr. Phelan, in the 13-14 school year to cap the French immersion enrollment. Again, this will not impact this coming school year. Choices were made, assignments have been made. We're working, again, with the high class size on several of the issues that I presented. And again, we would have to determine as a district what this capping looked like, what the procedures would be, but the goal has to be to have 2 English classrooms at each of our school. The goal has to be to, at the Collycott and Cunningham, to have those role models. And again, I feel it's my responsibility as the superintendent and the person who's responsible for the school system and the assignment of all of the children, that when we got to this percentage this year, I don't want to wait until next year. Again, if you go back to those trends, when we were running 50%, we had role models, we had 2 English first grades at the Cunningham, but when you get to this percentage, and we have over the last years, Mr. Phelan, Mr. Gillis, we've run pretty consistent in our enrollment. And so, again, this is going to take some working out how to do this. Our next steps are going to be communicating this to all of the incoming kindergarten families. Those are the families who will be impacted next year, to communicate with all Milton Public School families, again, people who don't have children in the district yet, and all Milton Public School staff. We're going to have to take our current lottery process and decide how to adapt it so that we can implement a capping in the school year 13-14, and that would roll out to parents, kindergarten parents, at their information night in January 2013. We value both of our programs, and we're committed to both of our programs. And again, this is our work. And again, it's to optimize and provide for really the future of both of the programs, our English and our French immersion program.
Questions? I'll start with one. I mean, obviously, the numbers this year jump beyond where we've ever seen them before. At 60%, once you cross 60% of first grade students choosing French. You all knew that, for instance, if 90% of students, 90% parents chose for first graders to go into French, it wouldn't be sustainable. But it's a little tricky to figure out where the break point is. But clearly, we've hit some issues here with these numbers at 64%, was it?
Well,
I think chose
66, and that
66 to 34.
that's
chose
taking
French
out the
immersion.
children in the co-taught who have IEPs.
This is going to still require quite a bit of work. I mean, if you think about it for a minute, just looking at the Cunningham issue, if you're saying that we have to have 2 English first grades at the Cunningham, are we then saying that only 1/3 of Cunningham children can take French in the first grade? Are we capping it as school by school? If you cap a district across the district, then you're saying in order to fill, if 2/3 of those Cunningham parents choose French for their first graders, we're going to have to bring English kids in from the other schools to fill the Cunningham first grade seats. I mean, it's going to be some tricky details here to work out exactly how this lottery process crosses over to maintaining 2 classes of English in each of the schools. This is going to require a fair amount of work still. I mean, I think the point of the presentation tonight is to lay out the issue that we have. We're reaching a breaking point with the percentage choice, and to say that somehow or other we have to address it. This is obviously not a final presentation to us. I don't think this is because that second to last bullet, adapt current lottery process to capping model, is going to require an awful lot of work. Ms. Kelly.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for all the work that went into this. I'm a little surprised that it's showing up under happenings, though. I think that this is a discussion that people, if they saw it on the agenda and heard about it, might want to have tuned in on the meeting or maybe even come to the meeting. So certainly going forward, I would hope that any future discussions around how we're going to assign programs, I think needs to be part of an agenda. The second is just a question on the historical enrollment section. It doesn't look like the co-taught is continuous in any school, and there's no co-taught noted on the 2012-2013. So I was wondering if someone could sort of fill in those blanks.
Yes.
There was 1 year, the co-taught is K to 5 at the Tucker. It's K to 5 at the Glover, with the exception of 1 grade. At one point, we moved 1 co-taught class over to the Collicott,
So that is the outlier in terms of it not being in the same articulated strand at the Glover. The two schools that support the co-taught program moving forward will always be the Glover and the Tucker at this point in time.
So at Glover for the 2012, 2013, that should have a star next to it? And in 2009, 2010, that should have a star next to it? Is that,
No.
am I interpreting that correctly?
Just to look at the chart, if you walk up, if you look at Glover and Tucker, every grade moving up should have a co-taught for grade 1, except for 2011-12, where the Glover program moved over to the Collycott.
Okay.
So
they're-
so the 12 and 13 yes, should have a co-taught asterisk next to it at the Glover and at the Tucker.
And then in the 2009, 2010, the Glover English should have a star next to it as well. Is that correct?
I'm just trying to think if that's the one that actually ended up over at the Collycott. Yeah, it should.
Okay.
There was one broken year, but for the viewing public, the Tucker and the Glover hold all 5 strands of the co-taught program, with the exception
We'll
of one
change
grade.
that.
Okay. And then, in talking about the World Language Committee that reviewed assignment, what they reviewed was assignment and not the programs themselves. There was no, granted, there may have been some touching on it, but there was no data analysis and that kind of stuff that I think is necessary as we move forward to figure out what is the best way for all students to change however we do it. So I would hope going forward that we would get information like, in our present enrollments, what is the percentage of students with IEPs and 504s in the different tracks? What is the breakout of boys and girls? I'm almost reverting back to way back when, I think Dr. DeFoon's one of her first years, we had the student assignment process, and that was data-driven, everything was on the table, and we tried to take a hard look at it. I think it might be time again, especially with test results coming, I guess, out of the 3rd grade this year, where this is the first time that the class size has been capped at 26 in French immersion. I think as a system, we need to understand what the impact of that has been, because I have argued this before, starting a French immersion class at 26, although it gets a lot of people into the program, it's not correct educationally, and you talked about it. You know, the ultimate class size would be 18, and we're not anywhere close to that in French immersion, and I think we need to consider those kinds of things as we figure out what our approach will be going forward. So, and then I think we also need to consider the co-taught model, and I think we need to understand how, you know, yes, there's information coming back that says it's successful. We need to understand that from a data-driven perspective, that yes, it is successful, it is meeting the needs of all the kids that participate, and that can be a selling point if that's what we have to present, but I think that needs to be part of this analysis. So I would hope going forward that the administration would, you know, put together a plan that would start looking at some of these data points to inform us as to how best to change the way we do student assignment.
Well, we do have that data for this 1st grade, and we had the data, and when you look at that data, it takes people time to disseminate it and understand it. So we feel on that chart where you see the increased numbers in the English and, let me see. Hold on. We took the numbers and the percentages, and so we took all of that data. We have it in special education. Again, we would have to have it to then have this English and French number to have taken the special ed out. And we have the boys and girls, the male and female enrollment. We can put that up there. Again, when you look at, we can give you all of that data. We can come up with the co-taught. You had asked before, appropriately so, when the MCAS comes out after having, at the end of 3rd grade, after having class sizes so large, to look at and compare it to when the class sizes weren't as large. And to your point, I can, at the next meeting, at the pleasure of the school committee, add any items that the school committee wants added and do the presentation again?
Well, I guess, I would love to see what the timeline for our decision-making needs to be, okay? Because I don't want to rush into this.
No,
We don't
we don't
have the
either.
MCAS results yet, so I would hope that that would be factored in as to how we move forward. Certainly having the discussion and saying that something needs to change, and certainly your recommendation that a capping process for French immersion classes is a starting point. I think it's great information for the public to have. But I think as a system, we need to be very methodical about the way we approach this and the way we come to our ultimate decision. And understanding what timeline you would like to work against, I think, would be a good starting point.
And so to your point, perhaps getting away from this, coming up with questions, short and long term, and presenting it again with added information. Again, when you see the data of boys and girls in special education, it takes somebody to translate, you can do it, but for people need time to look at it, and we felt that we were disseminating, we were taking it and giving you really, again, when you look at the percentages, you'll understand. And I felt that we were being clear that these kind of percentages, are really driving the special education issue in the co-taught and in the first grade and the special education in the district.
Right. I think the data is important. I mean, I heard anecdotally that we have, I forget what school it is, but a classroom of, let's say, 15 that has 11 boys and 4 girls. And certainly going back to the discussions around student assignment, one of the drivers was we want to be able to have classes that are much more balanced in terms of boys and girls. And are we able to achieve that? I think understanding sort of what these percentages presents and perhaps what the obstacles are to being able to divide students as we think is educationally appropriate is the starting point for us to look at.
Right, and I probably, I felt that we can put that data up there, but when I made the recommendation, to the point being the person that made those assignments for so many years and took all of those, again, being able to optimize the second bullet, increased number of English classroom optimizes the school's ability to heterogeneously assign students.
Right, but understanding where we are and where putting a cap on and what size that cap on is going to determine how well we'll be able to move on those fronts. And I think that's an important data point that we need to have as a committee.
Ms. Sherrod.
Ms. Gormley, I'm hearing Mrs. Kelly say that she's interested in a timeline, and I agree with that. That's really important. Was your expectation that this would be resolved? I mean, I'm hearing you say you can add slides. Personally, I don't think that we need to add slides to this right now. And I think I'm in agreement with Mrs. Kelly on this point, that the data needs to be collected and represented at another time. But you said that this needs to be out for next year's kindergarten, first grade class. So what would a timeline be in terms of, because you have an awful lot on your plate right now of things that are happening, balls that you're juggling in the air, district-wide. What would be a reasonable timeline for you to be able to come up with this proposal or collect the data, present it, and do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, the decision has to be made by the fall. When we start, when people start making their decisions about first grade. People don't just make the decisions overnight. They put a lot of time into and thought into, but we go out in January for the information night. That was the last point of the presentation.
So in order to prepare for that in the fall. And by then you'd have the MCAS data and other data, so that would be a reasonable time. Thank you.
Mr. Walker.
I would echo what Mary said. I think this is such an important issue and such a sensitive issue that we would certainly want to give people advance notice that it was going to be on the agenda. I'm certainly going to be interested in hearing from parents about what they think before I take any vote. But more importantly, I think, so let's talk about the first part of this process. I think this is useful information. We're trying to solve a problem. We'd like to make sure that in solving that problem, whatever that solution is, we don't create 3 or 4 others. So this needs a more expansive discussion. Specifically, is the class size in French immersion an issue? If you say 16 to 18 is optimum, it would appear so, but what do we think about that? But I'd really like to hear about performance. How have students in the English program performed? How have students in the French program performed? Are there issues that we need to address there? Would that affect how we think about class size? What exactly are we proposing? This says cap the French immersion program, but that doesn't give me enough specificity about what we're actually talking about. What does that mean? So I'd like to try to make sure we have all the questions, get answers to those questions, not only share that information with the committee, but share it with parents. Let's be transparent, and then let's have a discussion.
Ms. Sharon.
So I read this, or I received this presentation tonight as the first step. And there is a lot of work left to be done in determining all of the capping. And so I heard it as Ms. Gormley saying, and the leadership team saying, that they've reviewed it, they have a recommendation. You're not sure exactly all the specifics going forward, but that's the work that's yet to be done. Is that correct?
Right. And to introduce capping, you've just finished this year's assignment and enrollment. And again, one could say, why are you doing it now? Again, we've shown you the first blush of the data. And if it had run, again, 50%, and we had the role models and there were enough children to have the enrolled in the English program, the 2 programs. But again, the assignment was driving, and I think it was valuable to look back at the World Language Report that said if trends continue, you may have to look at capping. I wasn't even thinking about that report when we realized that the numbers were going to be so low in the English program at the Cunningham as to not have 2 classes. And again, it just shows how much work that group did, really looking at, to Mrs. Kelly's point, student assignment. But I think how to proceed is that we'll take questions, and this is a huge issue. We can present again. We can, as individuals ask for data, we can add it to this presentation, and again, work on it till we've answered everybody's questions. And it's a communication device that everyone can use.
One of the things I think we're going to have to get straight, though, before we even get down to the details, is going back to what was said before, is what are the problems we're solving? Making sure there are 2 sections of English at every elementary school is one problem. Ms. Kelly alluded to an issue of the divergence of male and females in the classroom. Is that a problem we have to solve? I mean, are we going to say that, if 50%, 52% of all of the first graders are female, that we want all our classes to be roughly 52-48? I mean, is that an issue that we have to deal with, or is it not? Because if it's something we're going to deal with, we have to deal with it differently than if we're not going to deal with it. So, I mean, we have a variety of different things to look at in terms of, back to what Mr. Walker said, we don't want to create more problems by solving one. We need to know what the problems are we're solving. What we have here is a problem. Single-strand English at a school is a problem. If that's the only problem that we're going to try to solve with this, then that takes us in one direction. But if there are other problems, we're going to try to solve it. I think that goes back to the need for the data to figure out what are the problems. And
And that's really, and it could be, I felt that I delineated the issues for the leadership team and myself when I said, what have the enrollment trends presented? What issues have they presented?
Ms. Kelly?
So I agree, understanding what the problems are, and I think that starts with the data, and then we can decide what we think we can solve by moving forward on this.
Yes, go ahead.
If English class of 14 with, or 15, 11 and 4 being boys and girls is an anomaly, it's at one single class, or it is the English program across the board, I might say, you know, is this presenting some sort of obstacle to success? And I think that's why we need to start with that core data. I still think, and I don't know that we definitely have heard for this, having a timeline established in terms of what, you know, what date you would like to have, because this requires, correct me if I'm wrong, a decision by the school committee to adopt a policy that caps our French immersion program. And so you would need to get a vote of the school committee, number one, that that's a new policy, and number two, what the procedures are for you know, developing that policy. So at some point, we need a vote, and then you'd be able to communicate it to the community. I certainly am not hearing from any discussion here any objections to presenting a cap, but that's a possibility, right? As part of this process.
I don't know if I have any objections.
Exactly, exactly. So there's a process to be had. I think it starts with collecting some more data, but I think we need to establish the timeline that we will work this process out. Is that something that the administration?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. And then
So-
just one other request, sorry.
Of course.
We haven't had a, this year's class size update in a bit. If we could just get an update on that, that would be great.
So for the next, if I might, Mr.
ahead.
Pavlicek, a timeline, we have all of the data, boys and girls and IEPs. Again, I still feel that I'll put the data out there. Again, this slide really translates the issues that are driven by the IEPs. We'll present a plan, again, the imbalance of the classroom so that the students in the co-taught can, again, the role models can be integrated into the classrooms. And a plan for looking at the impact of the large class size on the MCAS data.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if we're adding to the list of data, I'd like to see performance, boys and girls in the English program, boys and girls in the French program. With whatever measures you think are appropriate, but I would assume that would include MCAS data.
Ms. Sheridan?
Just to clarify for my own personal purpose, are you talking about MCAS data just in elementary school, or do you want it to carry all the way through to high school graduation? And
I want to know how they've performed all the way through.
The ability to extract that kind of data is not available at the state level. We get all of our MCAS data from the state, and the state doesn't recognize the two programs in their ability when they desegregate the data. So that would have to be done by hand over the course of 12 years for every boy and girl in every program. So we have tried to do it at certain points of the year to try to get some data. We have some district-wide data that we could use, i.e. not MCAS scores, but maybe math assessments for the elementary level. But that would be a considerable amount of data to work through by hand that would not be available in the next few weeks in the sense that we wouldn't have that for immediate review.
Then let's get what we think would be a statistically significant representative sample.
could we also use, for example, class rank in terms of French and English? Is that, I'm just thinking about.
No, there is,
All right.
no, you don't do a class rank in elementary school.
No, I know, but if he was looking for high school data that we couldn't flesh out for MCAS. I'm just
Statistically
trying-
significant representative sample.
Anything else?
No.
Ms. Gormley?
Thank you. No, I'm not done.
Yep.
I'd like to turn over to Mr. Phelan now. We have an announcement about an appointment at the middle school. Mr. Phelan, do you want to speak to this appointment?
Sure. The Pierce Middle School has an assistant principal vacancy. Working with the union and through the school committee, we were able to create make an existing position into a more assistant principal position into a curriculum-based assistant principal position. The goal behind that work with the union and the school committee was to give our administrative team more educational and curriculum tools and work to be done with teachers to support teachers and ultimately to support students in the classroom. With that in mind, when we posted our assistant principal / math assistant principal coordinator at the middle school, we went out to look for an administrator at the middle school level who had content experience in the area of math and expertise in the area of math. We had 119 people apply for this position. We had a team, a screening committee of Pierce faculty and administration and central office who went through all 119 resumes. We delineated people with expertise in math and administrative background, and we are very fortunate to say out loud that Life Lagueros, who is currently working for the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education as a district-wide state math person, to say in layman's terms, he's the math guy for the whole state, will be coming to the Pierce Middle School to work with our teachers and staff and students and administrative team to lead the Pierce Middle School in the area of mathematics, content, teaching, and student learning. He has been with the state, I believe, for 7 years. Prior to that, he was a math teacher at the middle school level in Medford, an associate teacher at a charter school in Cambridge, Mass. Life has a master's degree as well as a doctoral candidate and student at UMass Boston in the LIUS Leadership in Urban Schools program. We are very excited to bring him on board as our administrative team at Pierce begins to take shape. As James Jett has been announced the principal at Milton High School, we feel that Life Lagueros, in connection with Anna McReynolds, assistant principal, and Amy Gale, our curriculum coordinator, and our principal to be named later, will be a great administrative team to lead the Pierce Middle School next year.
And to that point, and to that point, we're in the midst, tomorrow we have our session where, for our Pierce Principal Screening Committee, you're represented by Kristen Bagley-Jones. We're going to, again, I think it's excellent for the public to know that in some districts, a number of applications are given to a screening committee and the superintendent screens them. In our community, all of the applications are given to the parents, teachers, administrators. They decide who they want to interview. They develop the characteristics that they're looking for in the new principal or assistant principal, and they develop the questions. And so tomorrow, we're going to decide who we're going to interview for the PS principalship, develop and refine our questions. They've already sent in their questions. We're going to edit them. And then next week, we'll be interviewing for the PS principals. So that search is underway. We have an outstanding screening committee, and we're looking to make an appointment to that important position. So these are some dynamic individuals joining the Milton Public School. Lots of enthusiasm around these appointments.
Would you just back up a second and say that Life is very well regarded by the math curriculum coordinators around the state. I've been working with a collaborative for 25 years, and he's one of those speakers that, can we get him? Can we get him? Because he's just really sharp guy. So
we got him.
So we got him. So this should be very good.
Just a comment, because in his history, it looks like he's only was a math teacher for 2 years. And his concentration while in school doesn't mention math. And yet, sounds like the math guru, which is pretty remarkable. So that's very exciting.
Especially picked up by a math person like yourself. And may I interrupt you for a minute? I thought you were going to bring up, this is interesting, that you're looking at these resumes, and we've gone to School Spring. We've gone completely green and online. And so when I look at these resumes, this isn't the resume that I would look at a year ago, or I would have submitted. And so you've got to keep in mind, you'll look at the kind of information School Spring gives you. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
That's okay. I just wanted to raise, we did, I think, establish 2 of these assistant principal / curriculum positions. So there's still 1 to be filled, is that?
No, we have, there are 4 administrators at the Pierce Middle School, the building principal, and 2 assistants and 1 curriculum coordinator. When we made the shift to maintaining the same amount of positions but reframing the work that each of them do, Amy Gale, who is a coordinator of English Language Arts, Math, and Social Studies, was appointed as the 2nd assistant principal in charge of ELA and Social Studies. So, in essence, we have created in what we would like to have had in our enhancement budget, we have done with 1 less person. So Amy Gale will be now referred to as the assistant principal in charge of ELA in humanities, and Life Lagueros will be referred to as the assistant principal in charge of math, and Anna McReynolds, who is our veteran assistant principal, will be our traditional assistant principal position.
Great, thank you.
And to Mrs. Kelly's question, working with the Finance Subcommittee and that advancement budget, bringing back the public to the advancement budget call for a full-time math person at the middle school. So we took the existing resources, and I believe that Mr. Phelan should be complimented as the Assistant Superintendent of Personnel to maximize that position, to Mr. Pavlicek's point, with somebody with 2 very, very strong sets of skills. I want to remind the public that if you have not registered your child for kindergarten, that kindergarten information nights are on the front of the Milton website. This year, we are further ahead with kindergarten registration, complete registration packets, kindergarteners ready to come to the Milton Public Schools. These dates in the end of May, this coming next week, these appointments are when the children come with the parents. And so it's very important, if you're watching or viewing or for the local newspapers, to call the superintendent's office if you have not registered your child for kindergarten next year. Tomorrow, a very exciting day at the Pierce Middle School, Career Day, starting off with Senator Brian Joyce and an array of careers that I think days like tomorrow change middle school and elementary and high school children's lives. I would tell you one quick story. I went to Career Day years ago when John Phelan was at the Pierce School, and a doctor presented to 6th, 7th, or 8th graders. And he told the story how when he was in school, his marks weren't always A's, and that he had gotten D's and F's. And his message was to keep studying and do what you love. And I walked out behind these 2 7th graders, and they hit one another, and they said, hey, with our grades, we're going to be able to be doctors. And so the message was there, and that if you persevere and you study hard, but I'll never forget that, and I know that for some young lives tomorrow, a career is in the making when they hear these individuals share how they got on their career track. Pierce Middle School is also going to have one of their famous concerts. Circle on your calendar, May 31st or 1st at 7 o'clock at night, and June 2nd, 2 in the afternoon. They only practice for half a year on those plays, and the play this year is My Son Pinocchio. And again, we've put out to the school committee. They know as well as their own family events. Next Tuesday night is awards night in the Milton High School auditorium. Over $100,000 in scholarships and awards are going to be given out to Milton High School seniors. A very moving night and a tribute to this community and the individuals who have attended Milton High School and the legacies they have left. Wednesday night will be the Boosters Banquet in the Field House. With the Field House, we don't have to go to a restaurant to find a phenomenal site. We can have dinner there and see every athlete recognized. Friday night will be the prom, and graduation will be that following Sunday. Miss Sheridan, I'm sure, will speak to the 350th. I want to remind the school committee that your next meeting on June 6th, Mr. Pavlicek will speak to it, but it begins at 6 with your retiree reception. The invitation is in your green packet. On the 13th, your meeting will be recognizing, funneled to us through the principals, a volunteer recognition. This event was initiated by Ms. Bagley-Jones, and it's a tribute to all of the individuals who have volunteered in our schools during this year. Last day of school, reluctantly, we announce June 15th, and your school committee retreat on June 20th. Thank you.
Okay. Couple things briefly under my report. First, I also wanted to recognize Stephen and Darren, who are student trustees who are leaving us after a year of work. And for others, you may remember 2 or 3 meetings ago, we made nominations to the Massachusetts Association of School Committees for awards for Friend of Education for Ada Rosemarin and a Partner of Education for the Copeland Family Foundation. MASC gives out 5 or 6 of these awards a year. Both of our requests have been granted. So we will have a representative, we hope, from MASC at our next meeting, which is getting longer and longer, but that's all right. They're good things to have, to present these awards. So we're going to, I was on the phone with Glenn Kuchar the last couple of days from MASC, and we're trying to set this up to see if we can have someone from MASC here to present the awards. So those are on the horizon. Well, the other piece, again, for the June 6th meeting is that will be our interview with it'll be jointly posted with this Board of Selectmen to interview people who have shown interest in the vacant school committee position. We had posted that we would like a letter of interest by this Friday. To date, we have received 4 letters of interest. One other person has said he is sending one, but I haven't received it yet. So that's the order of magnitude, at least, that we're likely looking at for the 6th. One of the things we are going to have to decide is how exactly we want to do that. I mean, do we want to keep them outside, bring them in one at a time and ask a few questions and give ourselves a time limit, or we'll have to work out some way or other to deal with that, or do we just want to line them up and shoot them together? Figure out how we're going to do that. Pass questions down the line. We have to figure out how we want to do this, because there's no prescribed method for doing it. Different committees have done it in different ways in the past. The last time it was done with the library trustees, and they interviewed the candidates themselves and then brought their recommendation to the selectmen. The selectmen weren't terribly fussy about how this was done, given the way it happened to them the last time. They were happy to be invited, I think. So we don't really have a process here, and we really should have a process for doing this, because it is obviously an important thing to do. The one thing we have confirmed is that I've told everyone who has submitted a letter that we intend to interview them on the 6th. We need also to decide when the vote is going to take place to actually confirm them. I mean, in many times in the past, it's happened all at one meeting. Sometimes you could argue you want to put some time in between it. The scheduling is a little tricky in June, because after our meeting on the 6th, the selectmen's meeting is the 7th. If you're going to do it the next night, I'm not exactly sure why you didn't do it the first night. I don't know that 24 hours is necessarily going to give us a lot of time to think about it. Our next meeting after that is the retreat meeting, which isn't on TV, and this is the sort of thing that probably should be done in a more public setting.
I thought we were trying to schedule a joint meeting with them.
Well, either of these would be joint meetings, but we're trying to work them out on our own, on our usual dates for cable and so forth.
I thought the next meeting was going to be at their meeting, which
Well,
would
their
be
meeting's the next day.
Yeah, okay,
And
so
do
after
we
the
want to wait
7th,
two more weeks? I mean,
do they meet every other, I'm
they're
not
only
sure.
meeting, they're not meeting every week, as far as I
Okay,
know.
So the 14th, they would not be
No, it'll be
meeting?
the 21st, probably. And the question is, do we want to put it off that long?
Well, is it
after
possible
interviews
to
on the
ask
6th?
them if they would consider meeting on the 14th, just for this particular topic?
We can ask anything.
And that way it would be done by the end of the school year, and,
I will check with the chairman on that. I think the more pressing issue, though, is how do we want to run the 6th? And then this is our last meeting prior to that, so I think we need to come to some decision, or at least decide on how we're going to decide between now and the 6th. Whether we wanted to leave it to a couple people to arrange a process, or we want to just talk about it here for a couple of minutes. I think one way or the other, we have to come to some decision, because among other things, the folks who are going to be interviewed would probably like to know.
I would just like to say that I'd prefer not to wait another whole week till the 14th, that if they have a meeting scheduled the next night, that we either, notify them that night on the 6th, or we go to the selectmen's meeting the next night on the 7th for a vote. I don't really see a need to wait a week in between when we interview them and when we vote. Is that what you were proposing, Mrs. Kelly?
yeah, that's what I was proposing. The next night I would not want to vote on the same night. I don't think that's fair. I don't think we do it to our candidates here, so, they come in for interviews. So I think having a 2-night process, I think, makes sense. I think that's what we've been talking about all along. I do think that we should interview each individual candidate. I think we should have a core set of questions that we ask every candidate. It's similar to the process that happens when the superintendent and her leadership team in whatever the group they have interviews people. I think it's a good model, certainly worked in the past. I certainly would not be in favor of us coming up with the candidates and presenting them to the Board of Selectmen, because I think that sort of goes around what the intent of the bylaw is. And additionally, Mr. Chairman, I certainly don't want anyone who might be thinking about being a candidate to think that we would line them up and start doing that. This is a very welcoming environment that we're inviting people to come join, so.
So are we proposing that we interview them on the 6th and the selectmen interview?
No, the selectmen, we will post it as a joint meeting. The selectmen have agreed to be here with us on the 6th, so
Okay.
there will be all of us here to do the interview.
And then we meet again on the 7th?
Well, we would meet again at a date to be determined to do the vote if we were doing it on two separate nights.
Okay.
That date has not been settled. I haven't worked that out with the selectmen yet. And the part of the issue is, on their scheduled meetings, it would either be the next night or 2 weeks later. And Ms. Kelly has offered the possibility of, would they consent to meet in between?
Yeah, I think probably a week is a reasonable period and gives us a little more time to process. Could we do it in 24 hours? Sure, but I think probably get a better result if you give yourself a little more time. I would volunteer to draft some standard questions, given that that's my area of expertise, for review.
The trick is review.
Yes.
Because we have an open meeting law about it.
Yes, we do.
So
we could make that the first order of business on the 6th.
And have them come in later in the meeting,
15 minutes later.
20 minutes
as
later.
long as they're sitting somewhere where there's no TV, so they can watch
Correct.
us draft the question.
They'll have to be sequestered.
They have a TV app. I don't think MPEG has a TV app just yet, so I think we're all set. Well, if you wanted to draft something and circulate them, or if people would like to just individually draft things, and if they have a question they'd like to ask, we'll just circulate them in general, not discuss
How
them.
about this? I'll send the draft out to everyone, school committee, selectmen, and they can send me edits, and I'll bring the edited version on the 6th for further discussion.
That's John and my job.
You can do it.
No, what I'm saying, it sounds like us, what we're
Right.
telling people tomorrow.
So just on the 6th, we have something at 6 PM,
Right?
right? So we would
Book your
be
night,
asking candidates to come in at about 7:20?
something like that,
Okay.
yes.
Just, but we need to be able to say
And if-
definitively to them what time.
Depending on the, when I have the MASC presentation, maybe a few minutes later.
Well, do we want to say then 7:30?
Well, I want to find out when MASC can be here. You know, so if they want to do it at the beginning of the meeting, maybe they can't come till 9 o'clock, in which
Okay.
case, then it doesn't affect the interviewing of the candidates.
Okay.
I mean, we'll just have to work that out one way or the other, and I'll just try to get that nailed down. As of right now, I know Glenn Kuchar cannot be here on that night, but he's looking at who could come from MASC, and that will probably determine a time when they could or could not.
Great.
So we'll work that out.
Well, we could do the awards on the, what's our next meeting, the 20th?
But that's the retreat that's done on
Oh, it's the
TV.
retreat.
That's what I was thinking too, but that's the sort of thing you'd like to do on TV.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
So, and plus I have to check on availability of the awardees.
Good point.
So have the letters of interest been sent to the Board of Selectmen as well? Have they been forwarded to them?
I was waiting till this Friday to
Okay.
have a complete
And then you just
collection
send them.
and send everything out. As I say. At the point at which I distribute them, they become public documents, but I was just, for your information, I just wanted to say that we have, 4.5 candidates as of right now, 4 official and 1 more apparently coming. So,
So how many questions are we looking at? If we have their letter of intent or letter of interest, are you thinking like 10 minutes per person or?
Just thinking a little longer than that. Half an hour?
Per person?
that's a campaign.
Oh, you might have a few questions, and they might have a few questions. I mean, this is a pretty important position, don't you think?
Yeah, I'm just thinking in the time of
Planning
the agenda in terms of.
It would, I think.
I mean, do we
if-
need to have a special meeting for this? I think if we're talking a half an hour a person, I think we should be asking, do we need to have a special meeting strictly for this? Because I think if you're going to take 2 hours out of the beginning of this meeting, we won't get anything else done.
Look at it this
We'll be
way.
here till midnight.
If they've taken the time to express interest, they probably want the opportunity to say with some level of detail why they think they should be selected. So I think 10 minutes is woefully a short amount of time in which to accomplish them. That's not even,
Then I think I would suggest we postpone the bulk of our regular agenda and possibly schedule a meeting for the 13th, when we are here
Great.
for the reception after the volunteer reception, do a meeting and do a
Great.
regular agenda, because I think that kind of time spent on the candidates will make a regular agenda hopeless.
That's why I just wanted to be clear how much time in terms of the rest of the
That's a good
agenda
point.
for the evening.
That's a good
Yeah,
point.
I mean, would people be available on the 13th? Well, we're going to be here for the 13th anyway for the award reception, so
right, sold.
And-
we won't come in overalls.
And then if we want to do a week apart, we could actually have the vote on the 13th as well. If we wanted to do another
If the
joint meeting.
selectmen are available.
Yes,
If the
the selectmen are
selectmen
available. So
Okay.
that's something to
I move that
consider.
we schedule a meeting for June 13th.
Second.
I don't
Sorry.
necessarily.
We don't need a
Yeah,
vote.
I don't think
move
we
that,
need
but
to
I
vote.
think we just heard it, so we'll do that. We'll just check to make sure there are no, I mean, we're planning to be here anyway, so I don't think there are going to be many complications.
Volunteer
I
reception,
don't
is
have a
it?
time for that.
It's in your green packet.
Yeah, what time is it?
I'm getting it out.
On the master sheet, it doesn't have a time, so
Doesn't?
maybe it's an invitation. Here it is, yes.
It said 6.
So we may have to move our meeting back a little.
Yeah, I would think your volunteer reception would take till 7:30.
Yeah, I would say so too. So we should,
Next week is going to be a meeting for us. It's a meeting for them, and then the following week's a meeting for us.
It will be.
so-
Yep.
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, no, we're all set.
Okay, yeah, We will have to post ours for 7:30.
Absolutely.
Give time for the volunteer reception.
Take care of that.
And that way, we'll just look at the interviews next week. And I will see if the selectmen would be available to join us at the beginning of the 13th.
And tell them there's ice cream involved.
If they come early, there's ice cream. Okay.
Exactly.
That might get them here.
Served by the school committee.
Exactly.
Most people I know would go pretty much anywhere for ice cream, so. All right, so, but
The only thing we didn't talk about is the actual vote.
the actual vote, that part is the one part that's prescribed. There are 8 people eligible to vote, the 5 of us and the 3 selectmen. And regardless of how many are actually at the meeting, it takes a majority of those to fill the appointment. So it needs 5 votes, and 5 of 8, period. And even if, basically absence is a no vote. So, it just makes it that much harder to manage. But that's the language of the law. There's no question about that. Yep.
And so someone would nominate,
It says by roll call vote, so
there
it
would
would
have to
seem
be a
to me you would have to
motion.
do, there's a couple of different ways to do it. You could either move someone and then vote them individually, or you could go around the table and have people just say, I want, I vote for so-and-so, and then if no one gets 5 votes, discuss it and do it again. It just says roll call, it doesn't say how.
right.
So, I mean, everyone has to express their preference, individually. It's not secret ballot or anything like that, was the point. So it could take the form of, I move so-and-so, and then we vote on that. Or it could take the form of, we just walk the 8 people around the table and say, I vote for A, B, C, D, and see if we get 5 votes that way. The process is pretty much up to us as long as it's completely public.
So to get to that roll call vote, or to get to a nomination, would it be possible to use the same format, since we're talking about using the same format that Ms. Gormley and Mr. Phelan use, of ranking all the candidates and then placing our, so we would say if there are 4 candidates, then we'd rate them or rank them 1, 2, 3, and 4 in terms of our choices, and then take a vote based on that? Is that a possible way to do it, or do we have to have a nomination?
The answer, I think, to either part of that is no.
Okay.
We don't have to do that, or we don't have to have a
Okay.
nomination. Again, the whole idea of rank ordering them, I mean, you want to walk down the table and say, I choose this one first, this one second, this one third, this one fourth. I mean, it's got to be completely public. It's got to be roll call. So, I mean, however we do this, it's not going to be we accumulate things and say, oh, so-and-so has the plurality, so I'll nominate so-and-so, because that would seem to work against the language of the law. So, I mean, I think one way, the 2 possibilities to me that seem to stick out are either someone nominates and the group votes, or everybody says their preference and see if we get 5 that way. I mean,
So I think the latter would be more like a hiring process, so that the roll call vote is, Mr. Walker, my vote is for Mr. Pavlicek. I felt that based on his description of his priorities and his sense of what the issues are and challenges for the district, I vote for Mr. Pavlicek. Rather than somebody, because there's no opportunity to have discussion except publicly, so unless you wanted to have a public discussion first and then see if you got a consensus, you could do that. But I think I like the idea of just, who's your vote, who's your vote, who's your vote? If we got 5, great. If not, let's talk some more, and then. But that way, there's no need to talk about every candidate, which I think is fair to the candidates. And if you go through that process and you have 2 candidates that are, you don't get 5, you get 4 and 4, then you have a discussion and maybe somebody sways someone else, but you've already narrowed it down, I think.
Ms. Kelly.
Just, I think This is a very unusual process. I think people are terrific to put their names in the hat. This is more public than even really a campaign, because you will be hearing discussions on TV about,
Yep.
the benefits of your candidacy for the Milton Public Schools. So whatever way that we can ensure that the candidates and again, their effort that they're putting forward is respected, I think, is the best way to go. And I think what Mr. Walker has outlined, I think probably fits that bill,
Yeah.
given that we have to have some sort of a roll call process.
Right. My worry is that if we just did it the other way and said so-and-so moves one person, we vote, and all of a sudden that person has, 6, 7 votes and they're elected, people could say, well, you discussed that in advance, or you didn't really put it out. It was less than open as to why that occurred.
Right, and also I think we'd like to structure it so that if there has to be discussion, most of the discussion is about the person who gets the appointment,
Yeah.
as opposed to those that don't.
I'd just like finally to say that I think it's wonderful that we have 4 people that have come forward and, taken the time to investigate this and put forth a letter. We haven't had an election with 4 people in a very long time that I can remember for school committee, and I think it's a great thing. You can remember it?
Yes, I can. I was in it.
Actually, 2 years ago.
I remember 3 people.
I was in
but-
it.
Well, my guess, Ms. Sheridan, is they see how much fun you're having, and they've all decided to come out and
That one.
try to join.
All right, so I think we're in somewhat agreement here. Mr. Walker will draft some questions, circulate them, people can bring some edits back, we'll discuss them at our next meeting. I would remind people, please do not reply all. Yes.
And then we just owe each of the candidates sort of a brief overview of what the job entails and any policies that they might want to be aware of before they continue through the process. Right?
Which I've also volunteered to do.
Yes.
if
Mr.
you
Walker
can,
is doing a lot of volunteering.
Check.
Yeah, okay. And I would like to, I would like to communicate to them, as I say, they had till this Friday to submit things. I'd like to get this done. If not this Friday, the first of the week.
No, I'd hope to have something to them early next week.
Yeah.
Great.
Just so we can get it out to them as quickly as possible. And I will talk with the chair of the Board of Selectmen and just run all this past him to make sure they're in agreement with this. From there. And I think that's enough on that. The 350th anniversary update. Ms. Sheridan.
We
How
are
many people are walking?
2 weeks from Friday is the beginning of our big weekend event. I can't believe it's this close. Friday, June 8th is going to be a spectacular evening here at Milton High School. Beginning between 6 and 6:30, there will be food available for purchase. We're assuming that people are going to want to come early and get their seats. I envision our middle field out back here to look like the Esplanade with all the different blankets arranged as people reserve their seats and walk around and enjoy all that will be happening. We will have food prepared by the PTOs, FAME, and the boosters are all coordinating to provide food for us. We will have a band concert featuring Milton High School Concert Band and the Jazz Band from 7 to 8:30, 9 o'clock, somewhere in there. And the fireworks will go off at 9:15 and last approximately a half an hour. So please tell your friends and neighbors and plan on joining us for that evening. Parking will be an issue. So it's not confirmed yet where all the off-site parking spaces, parking lots will be, but buses will be provided to make the rounds of some nearby lots such as Pierce and Kelly Field, Ullin Rink, so that people can park their cars and not have to walk great distances, but get some transportation back and forth. So that's Friday night, and then Saturday, we will be having the biggest parade in Milton's history. The morning will begin here at the high school in the field house between 8:30 and 11 o'clock. There will be an open house, so to speak, for all Milton High School alumni to come to the field house and have some coffee and pastries and see the beautiful field house. Many people have not been back to see it, and that's going to be a very exciting beginning to the day. And the fireworks, the parade will kick off at 2 p.m. here from the high school. There'll be an opening ceremony at Town Hall where there'll be a raising of a huge flag and some short speeches, and the parade route will continue down to the library, take a right on Reedsdale, and continue to Cunningham Park. We have currently over 25 bands in attendance. We have, I don't even know how many groups and floats and participants will be there. But it will end up at Cunningham Park, and there will be, again, perhaps transportation. I don't have the specifics of this yet, so I can't say, for people to get back to the high school, because there's going to be an afternoon fun family day with displays, more food, exhibits, fun activities for children and families. And then at 6 o'clock at night, there will be a band concert with many of the core bands that are performing marching in our parade will be performing on Brooks Field. So it really is a full day of events and activities. As I said, food will be available there as well. So come with your money in hand and be able to. All the events are free, but the food will cost money. So the concert will be from Drum and Bugle Corps from 6 to 7:30, in addition to the Mummers Band, for example, is going to be performing that night as well. Then Sunday, June 10th, from 12 to 4 o'clock, there will be a picnic at Town Hall, more food to purchase, and a gigantic cake that is being donated to us from the Blue Hills Regional School. And that will be all afternoon in front of Town Hall, and in the gazebo there'll be a Dixieland jazz band, there'll be balloons and face painting and magic shows for kids, just an assortment of activities, again, family activities. And then that day will finish up with a community concert in the First Parish Church from 3 to 4 p.m. So it's just 2 weeks away. We are looking for volunteers. We're looking for volunteers to help with the food in all of those groups that I mentioned. Information will be available on our website, milton350anniversary.org. And we will also need volunteers throughout the day, throughout the weekend, for the many activities that are being planned. So if you're interested in helping, please let us know. So hope to see you all there. Oh, I do have one more thing. So a decision has to be made about the school committee, whether or not we would like to march in the parade.
Of course we'd like to march.
Of course.
I think we should all ride unicycles.
Oh, there you go. That'll be a sight.
So I can certainly put us on the list if we're interested in marching.
Please do.
Okay. Thank you.
May I say something? Sure. The first night of town meeting and the concert were unbelievable, in my kind of language, home run successes. And so that committee's really to be complimented, and you doing the leadership. When you talk about volunteers, I'm just on the peripheral, seeing the work that people are being done, but I never saw, there were 800 people who went to that concert. And I think I've spoken to all 800, a night that they'll never forget. And all kidding aside, Mr. Cohane is thinking of us now, he would tease you. But that first night of town meeting is a night that nobody will ever forget, and it was flawless. So to this committee of volunteers, and we've been involved just because you're using the high school, thinking about every aspect of that for the children and the citizens of this town, that under your leadership, that committee's really to be complimented, because that really is huge, taking it on. And you really created experiences that this town should be proud of. They would be ashamed if they weren't celebrating their birthday, and they're doing it in such a way that I'm a really proud resident and employee of the schools to participate. And I want to tell you, you have those 2 home runs when many people had a lot of questions, including myself. They were phenomenal events. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foreman.
We have Finance Subcommittee report on the third quarter financials.
Yes.
Kelly.
I'd ask that Mr. Gillis give us a brief overview of the state of our finances as of the third quarter, and then we don't need a vote, but if this could be posted online, that would be terrific.
Sure, we can post this tomorrow. Being that it's almost 10 o'clock, I'll be as brief as possible. Through the third quarter, we expended about 66% of our total funds, leaving us about 38% left in salaries and about 12% in the non-salary line items. Having a little more knowledge now than I did at March 31st, I can say we're going to end the year just fine. We will spend everything down, but we won't be overspent on the total bottom line. Special education is about 1/4 of our budget. That is always a potential area where you don't always have as much control as you do, because some kids can move into the system, and you've got to pay for their programs, or needs change, and you've got to make accommodations. But that seems like it's going to work out for us as well. We should finish the general fund fine, as well as the circuit breaker special revolving fund. We plan to carry $300,000 into next year's budget. We should still be able to do that. The grants are being spent down pretty much as planned. The revolving funds are doing well. You'll notice there are 2 negatives, but those are basically timing issues. Sometimes throughout the year, you're just caught in a point where the revenues are actually lagging being posted, or lagging the expenditures for coming in. But they'll be corrected in the April and in the May reports. School food service fund, doing fine. It's been building its balance back up since we took the journal entry in the first quarter. That's about it. If there's any specific questions, I can answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Gillis? Anything else from Mr. Kelly?
That is it. I just appreciate the administration's detailed work on this, and we thank you.
Facility Subcommittee report, we've already heard. Citizens speak. There are no citizens left. Next meeting agenda items, I think we've handled that one pretty well too, actually, unless there are some others that we need to tack on.
If you have them. We do, Ms. Bagley-Jones wanted a report on alcohol and drug abuse programs, and I would say that we will continue the presentation with the edits on the first grade assignment at each meeting.
And the bullying presentation? Will that not?
The bullying presentation that was going to happen tonight is, I put it in one of your green folders. That's not going to go out till September, and so we're going to bring the bullying committee right before that's mailed out to parents. We decided that that would be more timely.
Anything else?
Can I just clarify, actually, I think I asked for the presentation on drug abuse prevention. Is that what it's on?
Yes, excuse me, you asked, and Ms. Bagley-Jones asked for
She
it
said
not
she
to be
wanted
tonight.
here. Correct. But it is about drug abuse prevention and what we're doing.
Yes.
All right, then. Well, seeing nothing else in our regular session, I would entertain a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of contract negotiations with AFSCME, our custodial union.
So moved.
Not to return to open session, but to adjourn directly from executive session. Moved by Mrs. Kelly, seconded by Mrs. Sheridan. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Sheridan?
Yes.
Myself? Yes. Mrs. Kelly?
Yes.
Thank you. Good night.